So we will start our meeting, this January 25th Planning Commission meeting. May I have or I'll call this meeting to order rather. Do you guys want to talk about the agenda tonight? It's a little different than agenda. We have a public comment section and we're also holding an election of officers. Do you want to deal with those as we come into them, or do you want to talk about them before? Or just approve the agenda and dive in?
Okay, let's dive in.
I like it. All right.
I had a question though about item 3 and 4. Is there a particular reason why we have the continuation after the new item? Or does it matter?
Maybe.
Was this a call that you made?
No, it was a lot of times that you do a continuation, so it might have just been an error on my part not to have the continuation happen first. Oftentimes when we bring a consultant in we have them speak first. So I may have done that, but there's no reason that we couldn't do the continuation first, because oftentimes that's what I think we've done. Did you have something that you were thinking?
Ask if you had a thought.
Yeah. So if we wanted to go with the continuation, we certainly could rearrange the agenda order, whatever you think.
I guess
Either way works for me. I was just hoping whatever was more convenient for whoever's presenting. If Red Crow LLC would prefer to go early, because I don't know if we're gonna have a lot of discussion if it's gonna get extended on this the code rewrite.
Okay. I assume you're speaking on behalf of the.
I'm waiting for Jamie to show up as well.
Jamie's probably waiting, like, I'm not gonna show up and wait for him to. So I tell you what, we're gonna,
Let's just move.
hold with the agenda.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All
All right.
have
Sorry for the confusion.
No, it's fine. Trying to be accommodating here. I like it. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda.
Okay.
Second, okay, any discussion further than what we've had? Tessa, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Bates,
Yes.
Commissioner Farrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Moritz,
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner Ostrander. Yes. Commissioner Matusek.
Yes.
Chair Newton.
Yes. Rock that, Tessa. All right, we're gonna try something that we've been asked for a few times over the years to incorporate into our meeting, and that is a public comment section. And the public comment section will somewhat follow the format used by City Council, allowing the public to come forward and bring forward issues they think are in the purview of the Planning Commission, something we should be thinking about. It's intended to be the chance for people to voice concerns, ideas to us. It's not intended to be a conversation. We generally have a pretty full plate of items where people have been waiting a long time to have their item heard and work through. So we generally focus on that, but know that you are heard. And if it's something we think we should revisit, we will. If you do have, would like to make public comment, we're going to ask that you limit that comment to 3 minutes. If you're in the audience, we'll ask you to raise your hand. I'll recognize you. Please come forward, state your name and mailing address, and then you can begin with whatever commentary you have. We will time your period up there. Wave a hand or something when you hit the 3 minute, and it won't be a hard stop, but we do ask you to be pretty close to 3 minutes, as we do have people who've been on the schedule here a long time, and we'd like to get to those items that are actually calendared. So with that in mind, we're going to call for public comment. If you would like to come forward and speak, we'll ask you to raise your hand. And we have one person already right here. Yes, please come forward.
Secret Warmond, PO Box 778, Cannon Beach. I just wanted to thank everyone. We just started having this with the DRB recently. And I'm really glad that we're having it here also. It's really helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who's our timer?
I can,
Not that that was anywhere close, Jan.
I don't mind being timer.
Thank you.
I can take care of it.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in the room here tonight? Do we have any hands raised online? Okay, with that, we'll move on.
Before we move on, can we just welcome Tess officially? This I think is her first meeting with us.
This is your first, yes, welcome officially to your first meeting. We're excited to have you on board.
Thanks for doing that.
Thank you for that. Next is election of officers. We didn't do this last year. I'm not sure what happened, but we didn't for some reason. It needs to happen every year at the first meeting. We're calling this the first meeting because last was really a rollover. We can elect to stay with the administration as it is, or we can elect to shake things up. We'll call for a nomination for chair, and then I will call for a nomination for chair and a nomination for vice chair. We can have a discussion. At each point, we can have a discussion before, whatever you guys think.
Well, can I ask a question? Does anybody feel the need to shake things up right now?
No, I
No.
don't know.
No,
I'm very happy.
yeah,
Okay,
same here.
Aaron, Les, you guys? Good?
I was just waiting my turn to nominate Clay.
Thank you, Les. Okay, may I have a nomination for the chair, please?
I nominate Clay as new chair.
And I'll second.
Okay, Tess, any discussion? Okay, Tess, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Moritz,
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner Ostrander,
Yes.
Commissioner Matusek, Commissioner Bates,
Yes.
Commissioner Farrow,
Yes.
Chair Newton.
Do I get to vote? I'm going to abstain. Thank you all very much. I've said this before. I am very honored to work with you all. I feel we've got a really good group here, bring a range of perspectives. It keeps me on my toes and in the chair. So I'm honored to be helping orchestrate this group. Okay.
Appreciate your leadership.
Thank you, Mickey.
And patience.
And we should also, are we gonna go on vice chair? Because we would like to sustain.
We are moving to vice chair next. May I have a nomination for vice chair?
Mickey
I second
and
that.
Moritz.
Do we have a second? Any discussion? Okay, Tessa, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Ostrander,
Yes.
Commissioner Matusek, Commissioner Bates,
Yes.
Commissioner Farrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Moritz,
I'll abstain.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Chair Newton.
A resounding yes. Okay, so we have our officers set. Let's move to our first item of the night. This is hold the agenda. This is a quasi judicial hearing, public hearing ZO 24-01, City of Cannon Beach, request for a text amendment to the municipal code, chapter 17 zoning. ZO 24-01, City of Cannon Beach, request for text amendments to the municipal code, chapter 17 zoning. The text amendments request will be reviewed against the criteria of the municipal code 17.8.070A amendments, criteria, and statewide planning goals. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the planning commission? I made a mistake. This is not a quasi judicial hearing. This is a legislative hearing. Okay, so we're going to start over.
We take back our nomination.
All right, let's do it. Do over.
That was my bad.
Thanks for waiting for me to get really.
Yes, right. Sorry about that.
All right, so this is a legislative hearing regarding public hearing ZO 24-01, City of Cannon Beach, request for a text amendment to the municipal code, chapter 17 zoning. Chapter ZO 24-01, City of Cannon Beach, request for a text amendment to the municipal code, chapter 17 zoning. The text amendment request will be reviewed against the criteria of the municipal code 17.86.070 amendments, criteria, and statewide planning goals. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the planning commission to hear this matter at this time? Does any member of the commission believe he or she has an conflict of interest or personal bias? Has any commission member? Nope, that doesn't apply. Any ex parte contact on this matter? Okay, we have the staff report.
Good evening. The City of Cannon Beach Planning Commission is holding its first evidentiary hearing regarding a proposed reorganization of Title 16 subdivisions and Title 17 zoning into one Community Development Ordinance, or CDO. The purpose of this reorganization is to make the city land use and development regulations easier to understand and use. The reorganization is in response to a code audit conducted in 2021 and 2022 that recommended a reorganization of Titles 16 and 17 into one title covering zoning and land divisions. As a reorganization, it is intended to be as content neutral as possible. A memorandum from Works, the city's contractor, and Exhibit A1 summarizes the reorganization. Exhibit A2 presents the table of contents and reorganized ordinance text. And A3 provides findings documenting compliance with Cannon Beach Comprehensive Plan and statewide planning goals. During this hearing and possible future hearings on this matter, the Planning Commission will hear evidence regarding the proposal, conduct deliberations, and make a recommendation to the City Council regarding the proposed code revision. This is an opportunity for everyone who has an interest in the reorganization to have their voices heard. The City Council will then hold a public hearing where it will likewise hear evidence and conduct deliberations before making a decision on the proposed revisions. The date of the initial evidentiary hearing before the City Council is to be determined. The Works team will now provide an overview of the proposal. Then the Planning Commission will accept testimony during the hearing and deliberate and decide what action will be taken, such as continuing the hearing or making a formal recommendation to City Council. And that conducts the staff.
Did I sit there or stand here?
You can send.
Either way.
Whatever, you're more comfortable.
Hello.
Hi.
Again. Keith is here too, I believe. Is that correct? So I'm Marcy McAnally with Works. I am here to explain one of the important steps in the code rewrite process. To reorganize the code, incorporate divisions and the development code into a single code section. And we have now finished that work, and it's for you for adoption. We had a joint commission hearing in December about this. We discussed a version of it that had comments, and people were able to see all of the different changes that had been made. While it's policy neutral, it does include renaming of the administrative procedures in order to put all of the administrative procedures into a single new administrative procedures section. But the administrative procedures themselves have not changed, just their names. We discussed that, and the version in front of you now for consideration and forwarding to City Council for adoption does include a few additional minor changes, and we put a printout in your hands to walk you through those. Keith could go through.
Fair enough.
Is Keith?
He's on.
I just can't.
No.
Marcy, are you able to send those to Aaron unless? Or Tessa?
Back
Or
row.
we can put them up on the screen.
Okay.
I'm up on the screen.
Yeah, that's actually better. Can you,
I would have to forward, should I forward that to our?
shall I forward it to you? It was an email that we printed out.
I'll forward it to me.
Okay, we'll do.
Take a minute.
Marcy, this is Les Sinclair. Could I ask you a quick question
Of course.
while we're getting teed up? One of the changes I noticed between what's included in our packet and the version that we got in December, I think, was there were a large number of notes that were attached to that version in December, and they seem to have all been resolved in the copy that's in our packet. Is that
It's probably more accurate to say that they've been put into a bank and saved for when we get to the code rewrite process, because they indicate places that we're going to address the needed changes. These
Okay.
were, yeah.
So there really haven't been any substantial changes to the text that we saw in December? Okay.
Hang on.
I could address that if you'd like. No real substance changes. We're gonna have to go through the zoning ordinance, kind of like what we did with the wetlands section. If you recall, we kind of had the ordinance and we went through section by section. This is strictly less kind of a reorganization in terms of duplication, numbering and things like that. So those items that were listed in the margins were notes for us, so that when we get to those particular sections of the zoning ordinance, they would be discussed at that time.
Okay, thank you.
And if I could add just onto that, a little detail, we're planning to address them in sections that are more related to topics. So our administrative procedures was one of our first steps to review all the administrative procedures. And then next to review policy changes, and that would include housing and parking at a minimum. That original list of policy areas that we were going to amend the code around included wetlands, but we will have that item done. Okay.
Still synchronizing.
Okay. We could start to talk about the item.
Yeah, why don't you,
Yes.
why don't you talk and then,
And I could turn it over to Keith to do that.
Okay, anyway, I'm here. What would you like me to go through exactly?
Can you start to talk about the list of changes that we're going to make to this version that's in front of people today?
Certainly. Okay. So as you can probably appreciate, going through something like this, you always have a few little glitches that you find later. So one item that came up fairly recently was DLCD contacted Steve indicating that we had a citation to the ORS 197-352 that is out of date because that section no longer exists. And Steve contacted DLCD today to just determine what citation we should make. So that would be one item that we would need to deal with. That has to do with measures 37 and 49. In section 1714.030, there was just some extraneous text that got left in by mistake following subsection D, so that would be removed. Just a couple paragraphs. In section 17.16.080, in your table of contents, it says that would be titled burden of proof for that section. That section turned out to be deleted and just included as a subsection in 17.16.070. And so therefore 090 would become 080. And section 17.86.020A, there's a reference of chapters 17.60 through, and there's a blank because at the time I was writing it, I didn't know what those references were all going to work out to be. We have those now and would have the correct references to all the other relevant chapters. Section 17.114040A, We just had a minor numbering glitch. And the same for section 17.122.060. Same thing. We just had some numbering. Sometimes it's the auto numbering and other things that just get you goofed up and you don't notice it until too late. So that's really it.
Okay, thank you.
These changes in the email are additional changes that are not in the current packet, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I was just confused looking at the our current packet. It looks like there's a strike through for the second to last one you mentioned, the 17.114.040. It had a numbering issue and then it was corrected to a different numbering issue. And so this is a third, making sure it's actually is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Am I understanding? Okay.
That's right. As I'm sure all of you can appreciate, sometimes the computer knows better and keeps doing what you didn't want.
I just wanted to make sure because
Yeah.
if this is the corrected version, then it needed to be corrected again. But if there's an actually corrected version coming.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Are there questions at this point, or do we want to, Marcy, is there more you want to walk through here, or do you want us to have a discussion about what you provided to us? Is that
That's
the latter?
best.
Okay.
Best.
I have a few questions. I'm trying not to go into too much detail, but I'm trying to understand where you are in the revision process. So are you envisioning more wordsmithing to happen, more clarification? Because there's a few places where it seems like there's redundant information, like revocation of development permits was, I think, in 3 different spots. I know one of them we just found out will be removed. But I'm just wondering, are you planning to do one more pass through to clarify and sort of clean up organization, or is this done?
I think that might be a question for Keith. Yes.
We could certainly make some more changes. I think we're mostly attempting to rearrange the existing text in the code now. And so there may be some places where there's some repetition that we didn't detect. We did try to get rid of some. You notice that we also tried to get rid of the repetition on actually relating to the citation about the ORS that we have to fix on the compensation, kept on being repeated over and over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
And so we try to get rid of that. And so we acknowledge that this still probably isn't absolutely perfect, but it was just trying to get all of the pieces in place so we understand better what's in the code, and then we can make some additional amendments as we go forward.
Okay, I think that was my main question.
Yeah.
You know, if we pass this on today, will there still be some editorial work being done, or are we supposed to be catching everything now before we pass it on? And it sounds like there's still room for editorial fixes later.
Yes.
So today we're agreeing to the concept.
Very much, that is very much true, what you just said. Okay, the whole point of this exercise is to get something that eliminates as much duplication as possible, puts it in sections that make more sense, gathers all the same types of things into a single location. That'll make it easier for us to have these policy amendment discussions. And at the same time, we can certainly make additional clerical amendments.
Great. Because for instance, I feel like director and manager should be included in the definitions. Okay. Because they're used so frequently. You know, details like that, it seems like as we go along, we may realize, wow, this is still not that clear.
Right.
That word shows up and it isn't in the front in the definitions, for instance.
Exactly. And the director manager discussion, I think, is one of the first things we'll come to in the administrative procedures amendments discussion.
Yeah, yeah. And so will there be a separate discussion about those administrative procedures in the future?
Yes.
Okay,
There will be yes, much.
I will hold my questions on your part then.
It will be easier for us to have that discussion too.
Right.
Yes, I do overall really like what you've done. Keith, I can just imagine how complicated this was. So I think at this point, we're just trying to get it into a form that we can all have a conversation. Okay,
Yeah.
Thanks.
Relating to city manager, there is a definition of city manager somewhere else in the municipal
found
code.
that.
can't remember where that is now, but.
It is at the beginning of the procedures section, but it seems like a pretty important term.
Right.
So that's why I thought maybe it should also be the front end definitions, just so that when people are thinking through, well, what does that word mean? You can find it where everything else is defined.
I also did find a definition though for city manager. It's in someplace else in your municipal code, chapter 2 or title 2 or somewhere. But we could look more closely at that. We did, in a conversation with staff, thought that at least for now, when we're referring to city staff being the actor, that it would be city manager would by and large
Delegate.
be the person, even though it could wind up being Steve or Robert or somebody else.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mike.
The impact of this, as of tonight, is simply a draft. Will there be a point, Mars, where we accept this reorganization before we've gone through some of those provisions that are still open, do you think? Will this reorg become effective before the discussion is over?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to know when that happens. Okay. When it becomes too late to change what's in this simple reorganization.
Right,
Because right now,
right now.
is it really?
Because once you make a recommendation to council, this is going to be adopted. And this new numbering and reorganization is what's going to set the time and framework for the rest of the code. So this numbering and duplication, this is the first evidentiary hearing to do that. So we're at the stage where Plan Commission is going to be making a recommendation to council to eventually, whether it's tonight or in the future, with this document to go ahead and approve it to start that framework.
That makes sense. I just wondered because you mentioned that there might be a substantive change in here somewhere that we're not aware of. And I just wondered if we stumbled upon it through the process that we could go back and discuss that particular change and make sure it's agreeable with everybody.
Absolutely. So again, this is kind of like you want to say the bones and the meat and the substance is all yet to be discussed. The first real substantive talk we're having is the wetlands ordinance. And so as we go through chapter by chapter, we're going to have that ability to have those discussions on those sections at that time. So, right, Marcy, I mean, in an essence, this is just kind of the framework to everything else. And presently you see how the code's written and how it's kind of, there's definitions, there's different, so it's more of an index per se to the rest of the substance of the ordinance. So tonight is a recommendation to council on that framework, with the rest of the meat and the substance still needing to come and have hearings before Plan Commission makes recommendation to council for such changes
Okay, I get that.
That recommendation is happening tonight, is it not?
on the framework of the ordinance, not the substance.
Okay, so I'm either confused with Mike's question or I'm confused with your answer, because Mike asked if we would have an opportunity to address the substance later on, and I believe I heard you say no, that tonight is when we're doing it.
No, that I believe Mike's question was whether, and maybe you could clarify that for both of us.
Yeah, it was more like, when you take something out of one provision and put it in another.
Yeah.
It may change the meaning of one or both of those provisions without changing any of the language. And as we go through the review from this point forward, I just want to make sure we get a chance to raise those issues and are not confronted with, oh no, you guys agreed to that.
Keith, I don't know if you can say it any differently. I think this
Substance changes in here.
Yeah.
I see this, the main thing is, do you folks feel that the reorganization structurally makes sense? And we have bent over backwards to be as content neutral as possible. I'd say that Article 2 is the one place where we had to write a lot of text new to really try to explain the procedures as you have them now. And label them a little bit differently than you do, but still procedurally it would be the same as far as what types of cases go to the staff, which ones go to the Planning Commission, Design Review Board, etc. that all stays the same. The criteria by which you judge different things, conditional uses, variances, subdivisions, all stays the same. I think that's the most important thing. We're going to, as Steve said, we're going to be dealing with the wetlands ordinance right after this. And I think there's going to be a series of times where there are going to be ordinance amendments. And certainly, in my view, if you found something that maybe when we get to the wetlands ordinance and you found something in procedures that, well, this isn't quite making sense, that could be considered as part of that ordinance amendment package that goes to you and to the city council. So the idea is that if there are any problems that you see after we get into this with the content, you'll have, I think, plenty of opportunities to make those changes as we go forward.
So from a timing perspective, Steve, you said this starts the clock. We have the framework, and then we have the substance. And each of these pieces, each of these substantial pieces, going to take a little while to get to.
That's correct.
What's the timing? What's the overall timing? Once we start assuming we start the clock tonight, what's the overall timing that we're trying to work, that we're constraining this process to?
Do you by chance have the, I don't have the time frame in front of me, but that you had provided?
The city council hearing is determined.
No, I mean, you're talking about the rest of it. You're talking about the entire project, correct?
Yes, and I think, yeah, most globally, yes, the whole project.
Let me start with what I know, which is that tonight, if you recommend this for city council adoption, there will be a city council hearing. This would go into effect in 30 days from that. And
That starts the clock.
Yeah.
Okay, I misheard then. I thought it was we started the clock. City council starts the clock.
right,
Oh, okay, then I'm fine with that.
So when you say it would go into effect if we send this to city council and they approve it, are you again still just talking about the framework and the
Correct.
substance? It's still
only the reorganization goes into effect.
Okay.
And as Keith has been saying, it is policy neutral. I believe it is truly policy neutral. I think there may be some relearning about the way that the procedures have been organized. And it's kind of, that will be one of that beyond the wetland, after the wetland is adopted, or probably even before the wetland is adopted, we can begin that conversation, dig into the administrative procedures. So it would be the first thing that we address. And that's appropriate also, given that this is probably the most changed section. It has the most new words in it. It's not supposed to have any change in the procedures. It's just put all of the procedures that were all over the place into a single location. It's given each of them a type and a definition that fits the Oregon, kind of the other cities use, and matched the way you use the procedure to the Oregon's sort of best practices standard. But no substantial changes have been made. So I guess am I answering your question?
Sure.
Okay. It's hard because this is a substantial change. You know, there's substance here, it's changing, but it's actually not content substance.
I think I have one question, though. It seems like determination of proper procedure type, was that new? This is 17-14-060.
Can you address that, Keith?
Yes, really, Article 2 is a combination of existing procedural elements that you have in various parts of the code now. And then a fair amount of it was written to reflect how you do things now.
Okay.
What I'm thinking in particular is that, you know, you had some procedural things, I can't remember what now, but seem to be understood, but not really clearly written in the code.
Okay.
And so we were trying to just put that all in writing. This is what the city does now when it comes to procedures on which, you know, who go, you know, how do those go? You know, like a type 1 is a staff review of some sort. A type 2 is another type of staff review. Type 3 is something that comes to the planning commission or the DRB. And then a type 4 would be legislative action that ultimately winds up with the city council.
Yeah, I think my main question is whether explicitly there is discretion given to the manager to make that decision currently. But it sounds like in practice, that's what's occurring. And you're just making that, you're codifying that.
But it's not,
Correct.
I couldn't find, is it currently in our code?
No.
I couldn't find that. So that is to me a substantive change.
They're taking a practice and they're
Right.
putting it into,
So that is to me a big deal. That's that's potentially taking something out of the realm of the committees.
No.
No.
Yes,
No.
well, we can disagree on this.
Well,
but I'm telling you
okay.
what many people who have read this have felt.
All right.
I'm voicing that feeling. So right or wrong, this is not currently in writing anywhere in our code that I could find. So it is a change.
There's a change.
That's correct.
so if we approve this reorganization, what code will the city be operating under? Will it include these exact terms?
Yes.
Listing.
Mhm.
So when we pass this on, we are agreeing to every word in here.
But, and that's my concern.
Yeah, mine too.
And there's nothing that says we can't continue this.
Right.
And have continued conversation. There's nothing that says you guys can't take a look at it closer. And we continue to have conversations till you feel comfortable making a recommendation to council.
Or ask that this section be rewritten.
That's exactly correct.
No, yeah.
Sure.
That's
Yeah, I
why
would say
brought-
Article
that's
2
why
is the
brought it.
But we started by
Article,
saying a big changes to procedures, and I think that that was an understatement by Urban Works and representing this, because that, me, again, this is a change and a pretty big one from a committee standpoint.
And maybe one of the things is I don't know, like the policy neutral, is there a way that we can, I think everyone has their own definition of what policy neutral means. And I think it would be good if we maybe heard what exactly we mean by that. So we start on the same page just with that phrase in and of itself, because I think it means different things to different people.
Something to say.
And I don't know if you have anything, Marcy, that you wanted to, I mean, there are some changes. And yes, this is what is gonna go to council and then what we're gonna have to administer. So you are correct.
Well, from a process of this code rewrite standpoint, if people feel that this is a substantial change, and we did promise a content neutral code reorganization, I think that we should go back to what, there should be no new language regarding procedures. And we should then move to adopt the new reorganization and immediately begin the administrative procedures discussion.
That would work.
A question from my colleagues, if you all read every word in here to make sure that you know.
I was reading the administrative procedures. That was my focus because that was what I understood had been the most changed. And I do feel like there's a conversation to have. I don't think it would take terribly long, but probably more than tonight.
Sure.
But I like the idea, Marcy, of moving forward with the reorganization and immediately addressing, because this is, as you and Keith know, this is an important piece.
Very, yes.
Have straight up front. So I would definitely support coming back with no new language, reorganized, and then immediately moving on to administrative procedure.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
No, I'm in support of that idea. And to Mike's question, I'm not a code writer of any sort. I'm not an administrator that does that, but I've done my best to scroll through as much of it as possible. And it's extremely difficult from a non-code expert point of view to find where the old match up with the new stuff. So it's something it's for someone like myself is extremely time consuming to.
no, I was gonna,
So my trust is in Mickey's revision or comments on the procedure type determination, and then my assumptions that these are not some substantive changes. But then it does kind of concern me a little bit when there are, after being
It
told
makes
not.
you question the whole rest.
It makes me question a lot of the other content.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not questioning anybody here. I'm just trying to make sure we're doing diligence. If the impact is gonna be, we're stuck with some new language in there that we missed. So I would like to continue. I would also like, if you guys know of other places, just highlight them where you think the language has changed, let us know. Okay? I mean, that would simplify the process.
That is what was in the previous version.
I'm sorry, I missed it. And we had a long discussion, the same one, Marcy. Last time when Lisa was picking through, thinking maybe there were changes that she couldn't quite get her head around. So and when we come back here, and again, it's just the complexity of the issues. When we have it again, I think we just need to take a little extra time to make sure that we've done our diligence.
Yeah, I
I
think
mean, just a month.
we're happy to do that. And the process that we would probably use is to go through the spreadsheet
Yeah.
and show you where the different sections came from and move to. I don't know if any of you looked at that, because we sent out the
Yeah, I did look at it, Marcy.
we could help walk you through it. I might need a little guidance. We might need a little guidance here about what would be the best way to go through it.
How much still, I'm sitting here reluctant to say that we should look at the whole thing, but there might be 5 or 6 provisions in here that are worth looking at that we could divide up and, my concerns are always the environmental pieces. I know the administrative piece is big, but over the course of a couple of weeks, we could break it up so that we can come back and say, yeah, everything looks good.
What if we had a work session between now and the next time? we go?
Yes.
Yes.
Fair enough.
Yes,
I'd love to do that too.
That's probably the best way.
I would prefer that. Because without being able to see it side by side, to Eric's point, this was mightily confusing. I had 2 screens. I kept going back and forth with old and new, and I at some point just gave myself such a headache.
That's what I was doing. And then I noticed as of Monday, the new website update to the code page on the current website is now way different from what it was. It started as of Monday, so everything was cruising along with what
Yeah,
I was
that's-
familiar with looking at. And then as of Monday, I'm like, I don't know what just
That
happened.
was an interesting change, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's,
We know.
But a good one. But a good one. It's the same thing. It just looks different.
yeah,
It looks scary when it's.
it's harder to navigate.
Yes.
If you know what general idea, because we're all familiar with the existing code. If you know where you want to get to, it's harder to navigate to that portion unless you know exactly the verbiage that you're looking for.
Yeah.
And,
Or the numbers.
or the numbers, yeah. So like, I know generally where in the code I was looking for, but to get to that portion, it was a lot of scrolling with the new setup on the website. But that's not a discussion about the new code. That's just the change.
Continue in a work session?
We can. We should talk a little bit about process. We also have public testimony that is on our agenda. Do we want to take public testimony now, or do we want to wait until we've had that work session? I think that's a point too.
I think if we have folks who are ready to testify, we should.
We should give them that opportunity. Okay, so I think maybe
Sure.
give them that opportunity and then we can make a motion. Okay, so at this point, we'll call for public testimony. The pertinent criteria to be considered are noted in the staff reports and listed on the criteria sheets of the meeting page of the city's website. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or municipal code or proposed municipal code, which the person testifying believes apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue. I don't think that statement's true in this case. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may request the opportunity. I don't think this one applies either. We're going to meet again, so I'm just going to strike over that one. Simple enough here. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Is there anyone who would like to speak publicly? Please come forward.
Sorry.
No need to apologize.
I'm Jan Siebert Warman, PO Box 778, Cannon Beach. I just had a couple questions. Well, I too am a little bit concerned about this term content neutral, the change. And I do agree with Dorian and the rest of you that want to really look at this more closely, especially with the administrative part that was changed, Article 2. I wanted to ask, for part of this process, will there be a paper copy of our present muni code? Will that be kept somewhere so that if we in the next year or two, whatever, have a question about something, is questionable, can we go to that old muni code and look at that? Will that be on hand to have here?
I'm certainly planning on keeping a copy because I need to know this. So
Yeah,
yes,
okay. And you think you'll keep it for a few years at least?
I think we're gonna keep a copy of this zoning, just like the other ones before. We'll always have a copy.
Okay, great. Okay. Yes, and I do support you taking a little more time. Thank you.
You. Did you want to also come, please come?
Jay Orloff, Toll Bond Design, PO Box 563, Cannon Beach. I don't take issue to the framework. It's more of the content in regards to the ambiguity of the city manager definition. I see a lot of sections that are moving decision-making process from certain departments, which would be applicable, such as erosion control, geo report, being moved from building official or planning to this city manager position, whatever that definition may be. And also 17-124-130 drainage plans moving from public works to city manager. So I really think that the council needs to take a little more closer look at what that definition is, and if the movement from the applicable departments, especially like the drainage with moving away from public works to city manager, unless there's a sort of like a consultation process or a recommendation based from public works to city manager, some sort of process there. I think you need to take a little closer look, and I agree with Mike that I think the continuance and work session would definitely be applicable in these sections.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I just make a comment real quick on that? I know that was one of the definition things that we've talked about, and Keith, chime in here if you want. I think what we are trying to do was, I think there's other codes that have oftentimes referred to the city manager or his designee. So that was kind of the idea, was just to have a continuous, a same term throughout, although the definition would say or his designee, whether it's public works and things like that. Not to say it has to be that way. If we want it the other way and as is, I'm perfectly fine with that. That was just a topic of conversation. Keith, I don't know if you had any sort of comments on that, but I thought that was the direction that we were going in terms of some of the input we had previously received.
It was, and then folks who take a look at in the reorganization, the reorganized code, 17.10 planning participants. This is in Article 2. And right at the very beginning, it just talks about the different actors and what their role is. So it talks about the city council, planning commission, design and review board, city manager. And then it just says with the city manager that he can designate other city employees to fulfill the duties of the city manager. So, and then it includes these other folks like the planning director, public works director, building official. And then there's an explanation of what the community development director does, since obviously that's a key individual in administering this code. So maybe these should be in the definition section as well, but I put it here thinking that this is a nice way to kind of introduce the procedures and who are the actors in looking at development proposals.
Just to be devil's advocate, what do you think is easier for an applicant? I'm imagining an applicant comes, looks at a section of code and says, oh, I'm going to go to Public Works. I contact Public Works, or, oh, this is the building director. I go to the building director instead of going to the planning department.
Right.
I just wonder whether it actually is more user friendly if we define where we can. And
Sure.
then when we can't, then we can say manager with the definition you have for manager.
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think one thing a code has now that's very ambiguous, it just says the city. It
Right.
doesn't even tell you who. That the planning commission, city manager, city council, it doesn't say anything. So we try to at least clarify it to the extent of this is staff versus planning commission, city council, but we can certainly refine that more. That would be easy to do.
Just where we can be clear, it seems logical to be more specific. I think everyone then doesn't have to question which department they're talking to.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, are there other people in the audience who would like to testify? Do we have any hands up online, Robert? No. Okay, we will close the public testimony portion of our consideration. Is there anything anyone would like to discuss after we just talked about or just heard? Do we want to make a motion at this point? Anybody?
I think we should make a motion. Should we clarify what the intent would be for the work session? Because we did have a discussion with Marcy about coming back with a reorganization that doesn't include new language. Are we asking for that or not? Because our work needs to be clear on what they're providing.
Yeah. I think. My opinion.
Is that something that Works would be able to provide by the work session set, whatever date we set?
Marcy?
At a work session of whatever date that you set.
Yeah, I'm imagining before our next.
So what's a reasonable amount of time for you to be prepared for a work session with the Plan Commission?
I think 4 weeks. You would be putting it into a packet in 3 weeks.
Okay.
I think for the purpose of our work session, the way it's presented here is fine. I don't think we need them to remove the added language. I think let's look at how it was presented today and dissect it the way it was presented today. I think that's really important.
That would reduce the work for Works, which would be great.
So I think that would be a better way to handle it.
People agree?
Sure.
All right.
Except it puts upon us the burden of resolving that by next month.
And
I don't mean the
puts the
word
burden on us,
impetus on us.
right? It puts the impetus on us to find anything that looks that we have questions about before. And then this gives Marcy her 4 weeks to clean up their version, and then we can kind of come back to it a lot more educated and a lot more clear with what is and isn't there. I'm sorry, I'm trying to use really nice words.
Do you feel like you have enough input from us relative to, well, no, the way we're doing it, you wouldn't need it.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I like that. Okay.
I guess maybe I should come back up first. So, a productive work session would be where we have, either you have information from us a week ahead, or we have information from you a week ahead. So depending on the way that you want to, you want the impetus to be with you, or you want us to be the ones that produce a change.
This is a work session just for planning commission, right?
I mean,
Well,
I think Works would need to attend, at least by Zoom, right, to answer questions.
I think we would want to know what are the items that you have a question about so that we can be ready to respond, with a revision.
Are some questions going to come up from the work session?
Yeah, there'd be some, but I agree. I think it would be very efficient if we have questions in advance, if we can pass those on a week before, for instance. I think that's only fair to.
Yeah. And just for a recap, of the concern seems to me to be around, I use the word control or the decision.
Administrative.
The administrative side of this.
Yes.
And who's making those calls. Okay, is there any other section people had concern about that the group can
I think
focus on so we can?
that's my main concern, that and definitions, making sure that's all clear.
Okay,
I'm non-specific.
okay.
Yeah, as the author of the reorganization, I would say that Article 2 is the place to look because that's where, like, as we've said, there is new language because we're trying to explain what it is you folks do now. And so I think instead of trying to look to find word for word where things went, that you're going to be wholly frustrated with Article 2 because a lot of that is new text trying to reflect what it is you folks do now. So I would just look at what it says and not try to find where you know, something out of the conditional use section, did that exact word verbiage get into Article 2 in the same form? It was just really too hard to do it that way because there were all these bits and pieces that you had to weave together, and trying to do it that way was frankly impossible. So I think the things that really are essentially the same and just reorganized would be all the stuff in Article 1. Those are existing definitions that you have now. Article 3 is land use districts, and frankly, other than renumbering them, they are the same. When we get to Article 4, general requirements and regulations for different things like access requirements and maintenance of access and so on, that's all the same, just renumbered. Signs, same thing. And when we get to Article 5, the environmental resource and hazards, again, it's reorganization, and frankly, other than maybe putting city manager in instead of something else, I mean, the text was the same again. Land division was changed a little bit in that I segregated land divisions, which would be subdivisions and partitions, from lot line adjustments because they are a little bit different. But otherwise, the requirements there stayed the same. So Article 2 is really the place for you folks to be spending most of your time because that's where we have some original text, and we were doing our best to describe what it is you do now.
Would we like to continue talking in light of what we've just heard, or do people feel comfortable we have a process that we have enough information to come back to a work session in a productive way?
I feel
I have enough, yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. Someone want to make a motion?
Well, I move to continue this hearing and to hold a work session to address concerns about the revised code reorganization.
Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Any further discussion?
Do we need to set a date as part of that motion? Talk about
I think it's
that
going to take
outside
us
of
a while
motion.
to schedule it.
Let's leave that open and
Since it's not legislative or anything, it doesn't need a date certain.
We could, the only difference there is oftentimes we'll set a date specific, but we'll have to just notice the hearing. So it's not a big deal to just leave it open until after the work session where everyone has a comfort level, and then schedule it when you guys feel comfortable that when it comes back, you can act on it.
I do think, just given the timing we heard, we should plan on like 3 weeks from now having comments to observe, and from there we can
Agreed.
figure the time.
Yeah, remember, we'll have our next regular meeting in about 4 weeks, so we'll want to separate the work
Figure that
session
out.
a little bit
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah, I get that.
It's kind of like 2 packets at once.
Is it okay if I discuss this just a little bit more with you?
Absolutely.
I think it would be really productive if we could actually kind of launch into a discussion of your administrative procedures like we have scoped in the code rewrite. And as Keith has said, what he tried to do here was reflect what you currently do and do it in a policy neutral way. But clearly it's not, people aren't comfortable with that. But that's kind of the question that we want to address in administrative procedures. In that phase of the project, it was all about let's kind of get down in writing what it is that you do. Make it really clear in the code and consistent. And I know it's a sensitive conversation because some of the things that you do, they're actually not completely clear or maybe not consistent, but they're very important, right? And so we want to understand that and reflect it accurately in the code. So I always thought that the administrative procedures conversation was going to be kind of a deep one where we're talking about, we're able to bring some of the knowledge that we have about the way other cities do things. We've also spent the last year and a half talking to people at the different bureaus in Public Works and other people who have to administer the code about the problem with things that aren't always clear or written down. And we want to solve those issues. But we also don't want to change important practices. So
We share that goal for sure. I don't think that anyone here disagrees with that goal. I think we just want to be certain that we are comfortable and understand how this codifies procedures, because perhaps our understanding of the procedure is different and we just need to have that conversation.
right,
Sounds like tonight we aren't
yeah,
prepared. We haven't had enough time to sit with this or maybe consider the concept that there are pieces where we may bring different understandings, and that is definitely a conversation we need to have.
okay.
But I at least very much support the concept of getting it into writing, so there is no question. I just need some time to be certain that I understand whether this matches with my understanding.
And the work session should really be a back and forth like that.
Definitely.
So I think this idea of you telling us what you see that maybe we move too fast on, we're not explaining correctly, and us understanding, coming in, knowing that a week ahead, and then us having a conversation about how do we make it actually accurately reflect what you do. That could get us through that very important step of the code rewrite.
Definitely.
We could use this work session for that purpose too, the double purpose work session.
Sounds great to me.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Did we have a second? I know you made a motion. Did we get a second?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
Okay.
we did.
Mike seconded.
Great. Tessa, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner Ostrander,
Yes.
Commissioner Matusik,
We didn't hear you, Aaron. That's a yes.
Commissioner Bates,
Yes.
Commissioner Barrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Moritz,
Yes.
Chair Newton.
Yes. Okay, continuing that item. Would anyone like to, yeah, we'll take a 3-minute break and then move to our next item. Okay, Robert. Okay, we'll get going again here. Our next item is a quasi judicial. Coffee. Our next item is a quasi judicial hearing, the continuation of public hearing CU 23-04, Red Crow LLC on behalf of Patrick Dave LLC for a conditional use permit. CU 2304, Red Crow LLC, Jane Irma applicant on behalf of Patrick Dave LLC for a conditional use permit for the purpose of creating a private use boardwalk spanning a delineated wetland and its buffer area. The property is located on Forest Lawn Road, tax lot 30 DA, tax lot 4100, and is zoned R2 residential medium density. The request will be reviewed under Municipal Code 17.80 conditional uses. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to hear this matter at this time? Does any commission member believe he or she has a conflict of interest or personal bias?
May I speak?
Ma'am?
I've been thinking about the suggestion last week that I recuse myself for conflict of bias, and while I disagree that I have one, I feel it within my obligation, I guess, to recuse myself. I want to walk through just quickly the requirements for filling it, sitting in this position. 17.110.65 says no person shall sit in a hearing who has a conflict of interest defined as a financial interest or the financial interest of a closely associated loved one. Somebody within the notice radius of the project under consideration. I am not. Somebody has a direct stake in the outcome of this. I have none. There is a fourth item in there that says if anybody feels like they cannot perform their duty impartially, then they may refuse. I don't necessarily feel that way, but I do understand perceptions. And so for that reason, I am recusing. I just want you guys all to understand that it's not because I can't fulfill the duties with respect to this particular applicant or application. It's that I have respect for you guys and the process and the commitment and the tenacity and the discipline you bring to it. And I don't want to become a distraction. So with that, I would like to recuse myself.
Can it be denied? Can his request be denied? No, it's a serious question.
We can have a discussion among.
I don't want to have this has nothing to do with the city, with the applicant. This is simply my decision and I am, it's kind of like that Johnson, if drafted, I will not serve, or if nominated, I will not serve. Anyway, I think I need to just walk away from this. So I do not distractions.
Okay. Bill, a question was asked, if, he needs to stay in the audience or if he's free to go at this point.
So two different things. I want to answer a question you asked a minute ago about can that be denied? And the answer is no. If a commissioner announces that they are not going to participate, they have that right to do that. But yeah, the second thing is if in fact someone recuses, they should step down from the dais. They can remain in the audience. And frankly, they could testify one way or the other if they choose to, but they should not be on the dais if they recuse themselves, either for conflict of interest, bias, or anything else.
I didn't phrase my question well, sorry. Is he free to leave the room or does he need to stay in the room?
Oh, he can leave the room. There's
okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
Good night.
Okay, moving on. Has any commission member had any ex parte contacts or made a site visit? Covered that.
Yeah.
We've site visits. And we have a staff report.
Yeah,
We don't.
pretty brief.
Yeah, let's keep.
We tabled this and continued it at our January 17th meeting. The date was to come back this evening and continue with the discussion. The application is for that conditional use permit for boardwalk that is spanning a portion of the subject property's wetland and its buffer area. So that's about the extent of the staff report this evening, and we're here to answer any questions.
Okay. We do have additional correspondence. Has everyone had a chance to review? Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks for bringing that up. I did, Jamie Learma did send a letter in fairly late. That was part of the packet. I believe it was from Attorney Brian Chenoweth. And so I just wanted to let Aaron and Les know that I tried to email that to him during our break.
Okay.
We just read through it. Bill, at what point can we just flat out stop reading the supplemental evidence or evidence at the last minute?
Hearing that.
I think the question is at what point can we cut off taking additional information into the record? Aaron, did I get the question right? Essence of the question.
Yeah, sorry, these stupid AirPods are just a pain in the neck. So yeah, that's exactly right. At what point can we does last minute exhibits have no relevance on our decision? At what point can we just ignore them?
I hear two different questions. One, you know, what point can you cut them off? At what point can you ignore them? The first question is, it's a public hearing, and the nature of the hearing is that you receive testimony. Typically, you expect oral testimony, but written testimony is part of the hearing as well. You know, and so you can't cut off people submitting things at the hearing. However, you know, you are going to make your decision based on the evidence that you have in front of you. There is, as I kind of went through last week, sort of a polite fiction that you know, you are not reading every jot and tittle, every number and word in it in all submissions. You know, as I said, like a traffic engineer's report probably has 30, 40 pages of turning motions that I frankly don't understand. Same with the geotech, you know, and so you don't read the entire thing. You get the information that you get. And so you make the decision based on the information that you have. That information is the entire record that's available to you. If you get information at the hearing and based on your understanding, it doesn't affect your decision, you're free to make the decision based on the information that is available to you.
Bill, I seem to remember we did set a time of 5 o'clock at one point on this commission where we did not accept anything after 5. It seems like with a process like that, we have, and I'm not suggesting it's the case tonight, but it seems like in a process like that, we have the opportunity to miss something that could be pretty relevant to a conversation and consideration.
That, you know, it's the nature of the process that is set up. You know, to the extent you want to hold the hearing and make a decision the same night, that's an inevitable, almost inevitable result. You know, if you want to ensure that you always have a chance to thoughtfully consider everything that comes in, you know, the answer is to hold the hearing and then, you know, set a time for a week later, 2 weeks later to make your decision. That runs into some conflicts with 120-day clock. You know, I guess you think about a court for those of you who may have some experience with it. Sometimes you have judges who rules from the bench because they can absorb that information and take it in. And sometimes judges hold it for, you know, take it under consideration and issue a decision weeks, months later. And so, you know, it's really, do you feel comfortable making a decision based on the information you received? And if you received a whole bunch of information the night of that you view as relevant, you've got to absorb, then you probably shouldn't make a decision that night, but postpone it.
Okay, thank you. With that in mind, do people feel like they've had enough time to review the letters submitted? Or would they like a minute or two here to look at it now?
I think I'm fine.
Okay, feeling good?
I'm fine.
All right, I feel confident as well.
Yes.
Les, Aaron?
I'm not quite as comfortable. We got it just at the break, and I'm reading it as quickly as I can, but
Take your time. You can take your time. Please don't rush. Do read it. It's important that you be up to speed on everything that's being presented to us.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm fine. I've read through it, what I thought was relevant.
Okay.
Okay, Clay, I think I'm ready to move forward.
Okay, great. Thank you, Les. No additional correspondence?
No.
Okay. We'll call for public testimony. The pertinent criteria to be considered are noted in the staff reports and listed on the criteria sheets on the meeting page of the city's website. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or municipal code which the person testifying believes apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal based on that issue. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional testimony, arguments, or evidence regarding the application. The planning commission shall grant such request by continuing the public hearing or leaving the public record open for additional written testimony or arguments. I'll just state at this point, we've already had a continuation. We continued to this meeting. We will not be granting another because of the timing. Well, I shouldn't say, because I'm not the person to say that by myself, but we will be challenged to grant another because of the time that we have to approve a permit like this without, for lack of a better legal word, jamming our city council should something be appealed. So for the sake of protecting any conclusion we come up to tonight, we'll be challenged to grant a continuation, but we will talk about it. Persons who testify shall first receive, and let me just throw out one more thing. We're only legally required, just so people don't think that we are not being fair. We're only legally required to grant one extension. After that, it's our decision. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Is there a presentation by the applicant?
Yes. Jamie Lerma, P O Box 825, Cannon Beach, Oregon. I'm the applicant representing Pat Dave LLC owners. I have a question to begin with. Is now that Commissioner Bates has recused himself, what is the status of his written testimony? Of his written correspondence here? Does that go out the door with him?
That's probably a good question for our council. Bill, did you hear the question?
I did hear the question, and that the letter from Commissioner Bates is part of the record.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to address his letter then in my testimony now. So last week at the Planning Commission, the commission did not request any additional information in support of the conditional use permit. No deficiency in the application were noted, with the exception of a minor notational error regarding the width of the proposed boardwalk. That notational error was corrected and is in your packets. As an accessory structure, the size of the boardwalk is limited to a maximum of 120 square feet. So just to restate, the application is for 26-foot long, 4.5-foot wide, private use boardwalk, spans a wetland and wetland buffer, footings in the upland. The boardwalk meets the R2 zone, 5-foot side yard setback, and at 117 square feet is below the 120 square foot maximum area allowed for accessory structures. The boardwalk provides legal access to a 2-family detached home, which is an allowed outright use in the R2 zone. The R2 application and the CUP application were deemed complete by the city planning department on November 29th, 2023. The exhibit C4 in the packet is a letter from Commissioner Bates. You have our legal response to his legal argument from Chenoweth Law Group, and that was submitted late. I apologize for that. I was at home making copies for all of you, running around like a chicken with my head cut off, but Robert or someone at the city handled that, so I appreciate that. Thank you. So I won't belabor the legal argument side of it, but I do want to make some common sense rebuttal of his positions as he stated in his letter. He says in his letter that because planning staff cannot review and make a final decision on the underlying type 2 permit application until legal means of access is granted by approval of the boardwalk CUP, that affords the planning commission the legal grounds to not only review our type 2 application, but also to delve into the meaning and intent of the R2 zoning code. That seems like a stretch to me. I think that oversteps the intent of this hearing, which is just to consider the conditional use permit. And it also makes the process circular. We came in, city staff right now is withholding review of the completed type 2 application pending approval of the CUP. And based on the contents of his letter, Mike Bates wants us to go back now and review the type 2 in order to make a decision on the conditional use permit. We've submitted this 2-family detached dwelling application 3 times. The first time, you've seen 2 of them, including this one, but the first time we came in without a conditional use permit, and it was denied for being incomplete by city planning staff. So we were required to submit the conditional use permit, to submit the type 2 and conditional use permit together. And that's what we did for the second iteration, which was denied due to some problems with the location and size of the bridge, and with this one that's before you tonight. And in his letter, Commissioner Bates makes a jump from that process. He said that process is necessary because the underlying language of 1704-195 is ambiguous. And so I know you guys know this already, and I'm going to say it here again. 1704-195 defines duplex or 2-family dwelling as a building or buildings containing 2 dwellings with or without a common wall or ceiling, and where there are no direct interior connecting doorways. And the heading of that code says dwelling, comma, duplex or 2-family. Fruit, comma, banana or apple is how I read it, right? So if you break it down into its elements, it gives you an option, duplex or 2-family. We're taking 2-family. Building or buildings, we're taking buildings. 2 dwellings, check, we have that, 2 dwellings. With or without common wall or ceilings. We're saying without common walls or ceilings. No interior connecting doorways. Check, we don't have those. So just on a basic reading of that code definition, we meet it. And we've submitted 2 consecutive 2-family detached type 2 applications to the city, both which were determined to be complete. And in either of those applications was our use flagged by staff as inconsistent with R2 zoning code. The only one who's made that argument was Commissioner Bates. And I haven't heard anyone else on the commission really pick that argument up and argue it as well. Only Commissioner Bates. In his letter, Commissioner Bates asked this question: I have to wonder why our public servants didn't just go ahead and sanction 2 dwellings held in separate ownership on every parcel in R2 or R3 in the community. And I would argue that that's precisely what is allowed in R2 and R3 zones in the community. 2-family dwellings are allowed use in the R2 zone and in the R3 zone per CBMC. And our public officials at the state level passed the Oregon Condominium Act, which allows us to sell them separately. And I guess I'll, for the record, read what the Oregon Condominium Act says about condominiums. So this is ORS 100.022, application of zoning, subdivision, building code, or real property law to condominium. Paragraph 1, a zoning, subdivision, building code, or other real property law, ordinance, or regulation may not prohibit the condominium form of ownership or impose any requirement upon a structure or development proposed to be submitted to the condominium form of ownership under this chapter that it would not impose upon a structure or development under a different form of ownership. And I won't go on, but I think that's clear. Further in his letter, Commissioner Bates goes on to talk about the temporary construction access. I said this in the last hearing, but I'll say it again in response to his letter. We have support for access to South Hemlock from the City of Cannon Beach Public Works Director upon approval of permits. And I'll say that there are many construction projects in the City of Cannon Beach that access their sites from Hemlock Street. Temporary construction access and other right-of-way provisions for development are the rule and not the exception in Cannon Beach. The city does not prohibit development projects based on traffic impact. Access plans are developed in conjunction with City Public Works and other departments, and will meet whatever requirements and restrictions are placed on construction access, including restoration to near current condition along South Hemlock if that's required, or a gate or boulders or whatever the city deems appropriate to close that access off once construction is complete. Finally, Commissioner Bates states in his letter that it would be easier for everyone had the applicant combine the application for conditional use with the application for type 2 development. And that is precisely what we've done twice now. Type 2 and CUP applications were submitted on the same day, and each of those applications reference each other. So they've been there the entire time. we submitted the type 2 application along with floor plans at the request of planning staff and the commission who said in public hearings during our first version of this development that they wanted to see the underlying development that required the CUP for access. So we were trying to be as transparent as possible with you by providing you with all of that information up front. And I guess I would say in closing that this has been more than a 3-year process. And some of you guys have been on the commission the whole time, including some of the staff. And we started out with a 7-lot subdivision that had footprints going into the wetlands. And we brought that in and bandied that about. And we didn't get a very good reception for that. We pared that down to a 5-lot subdivision. We really thought we had something there. That fell flat on its face. We pared that down to a 3-lot subdivision and with access off a Hemlock. And you know what happened there? That was a no-go. And so now here we are with this application, and it feels to me like we've really come up with something that is environmentally responsible. Where we've responded to all of the requirements of the city, and you know, maybe we thought the sweet spot was for the 3-lot subdivision, but I think we've got like I said, a responsibly developed project here that we kind of created in conjunction with the planning commission over the last 3.5 years. So I'm asking you to approve this tonight. Thank you.
Question for Mr. Thurman? I don't know if it's a question for you or to Robert, but I don't think I've seen plans for the actual residence. Have those been submitted?
Yes.
Yes, that's all in the design review board packet, which is currently under review right now, and the design review board information is available online.
Is there any way that can come up on screen during this conversation? It would really help me visualize something that I'm.
It's also in the planning package.
I think it is, yeah. Last week's planning packet.
Was it in there?
Yeah, it was. See if I can find the page number once.
Site plan also reflects exact footprints as well.
I want to see the design of the units, not the footprint.
This is exhibit A3 for this file. And let me just, for the people on Zoom. Sure.
From our packet last week, it starts on page 29.
So this is the floor plan of the north residence. That is the south residence.
And garage.
Garage.
Sorry, Robert, can you scroll down to the second residence again, just for a minute? Okay, thank you.
Jamie, last week, we had a discussion around that access off of Hemlock. I had, well, I guess I did ask you directly, if you had, if you could come back with some kind of idea of what a reasonable amount of time to have that access is for you guys, so that we can set some sort of a time, or we can consider some sort of a time to close that off.
Yeah, and I actually briefly spoke to Robert about it too, but I was thinking that if we said 60 days from the first occupancy permit that's issued, and I think that gives us time. I would prefer to have it all done at the moment that we get our first occupancy permit and be done, because being able to wrap a project up and walk away is the most efficient way to do it. But weather constraints might, the weather might cause some problems, some issues with that. So if we said 60 days from the date of the first occupancy permit, I think that would give us enough time. Usually within a 60-day period, we can find some weather in there that would be that would allow us to work. And really by that time, if we're to the end of the project and we're doing occupancy, we're talking about landscaping, really. We're talking about, or maybe what's required to close the access up might be impacted by weather,
Right.
But I would work within whatever standards you wanted to set for us on that.
Okay.
Could someone just remind me what an occupancy permit actually means?
Certificate
I'm not a builder, so.
Certificate of occupancy means that the house has passed the final inspection and is now suitable for human habitation.
So at that point, the structure is complete, the interior is complete. So what is left that needs access after that first permit?
There could be a variety of things, but in most of the time, when you're at that point in construction, you might be talking about the landscape issues or even just closing up the construction access. We're gonna be putting in bark chips and steel plates, and that will require equipment to get it out of there. And you know, maybe 60 days, maybe it would be 30 days, but I think we have to have some allowance for delays.
Punch list.
Okay.
Yeah, punch list, exactly.
Ed, this is a little different question for you, but in the essence of trying to have you involved in a conversation and a point that I am going to consider here tonight and I'm going to bring forward for discussion with my peers. Water has always been a concern in the wetland and the handling of water. One idea that occurred to me as I thought about what we've been talking about was it would be ideal to keep water in the wetland. So we have the situation you have next door at 1603 where the water was going into your wetland.
Yeah.
And that affected the wetland. I would like to see water staying in that wetland from the two rooftops, basically. So if we put something in here tonight, if we were to come to a approval with conditions, and one of those conditions was the water from drainage was to go into the wetland, could you see any, I won't want to put it that broadly, broadly, is that something that you would be okay with?
Yes, let me tell you what right now we have an approved permit to extend, the city has an 8-inch pipe that has a series of catch basins that come down Forest Lawn Road from the south to the north. And it terminates in public right of way, right in front of the garages for this project. It's gonna have to be moved just as a function of being able to develop the garage. So and we also have Ms. Dorsey's rain drains now are just coming out, and they're also just daylighting is what we call it, out into the public right of way, right where the city is dumping its water. So at our expense, and I say our, I mean the owner has agreed to, at his own expense, take the city storm that collects the Forest Lawn Road water, Roseanne Dorsey's water, and move it to the north to a point in the wetland and discharge it there. And then from there, the city has a culvert on the east side of the wetland that goes underneath Hemlock that takes it out to a city culvert on the east side of Hemlock. So it'll kind of complete the system. We're required to take our water into the city system. That's what the code says now. So I don't think we can just point source it out into the wetland, but it's literally into the city system in front of the house in the right of way, and then 80 feet, 100 feet, and then right into the wetland. That's the plan right now. We have a permit to do it at our expense.
It goes into the system, moves around a certain portion of the site and back into the wetland. Even if we said it has to drain straight from the house to the wetland, effectively, the only difference between what that would be and what you're saying is the position the water discharges.
That's right. And then
Doesn't it go to the east of, didn't you just say that the water ends up at the east side of Hemlock?
It does, but first to your point, in order to get the water to the wetland, we would have to, we'd have to get the pipes over there somehow. If we go to the city system in the right of way first, we don't have to mess with the wetland. We go around it on the road. We take it up to a point between our former lots 4 and 5 of the 7-lot subdivision we were thinking about doing, but we dump it right there and it goes right back in, right into the wetland without disturbing the wetland.
Robert, can you pull up that site plan real quick?
And then, Dorian, if it goes into the wetland, and then the city has long had I think a 12-inch pipe that runs under Hemlock at basically the northeast corner of the property.
I believe there's another site plan a little further up this is just the enlarged one. Do you have the one from the packet? You can roll up.
I think they're for.
This one, I believe will show it.
What's the number?
The one you're showing.
AS1. It was in your packet last week.
Because the way that I have them sorted is a little different.
This one house site plan will probably have it.
Okay.
That you have right there. Okay, so well, I can walk up to the screen if
That'd probably be
that's
more,
okay.
yeah, please.
Right here is the city storm that Robert, Jamie's talking about, and here's the exit passage of it here. And I believe what Jamie's proposing that we move it up and outside of our source here to get it still to feed into the wetland. In regards to, dumping roof, watershed into the wetland, I don't believe that's allowed through, city public works. We have to collect it, put it into storm unless we use a dry well or unless there isn't a storm available to us to do it.
So let me see if I understand this. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Jamie's help me out
So
here.
currently, the water from Forest Lawn that's going into the drain and potentially goes into the wetland, will still go into the wetlands.
Yes.
Water from the homes will not go into the wetland.
It will go in the wetlands. Right now, we have, this is the Dorsey residence right here. So her rain drains used to come out right here.
Okay.
And now they come out to the street and they come over to this, it's not really a catch basin, it's kind of a hole in the ground right here. It's not in the roadway itself, it's kind of off to the side, but it's in the right of way. This catch basin here connects to three catch basins up the street. It carries water down from the paved section and from whatever runoff there is down the street, collects here, comes across and dumps out in front of the garage, basically. And this line right now also dumps out right here. So right now we just have a hole with a collection of water right here. We already have a permit and an agreement with the city to pay for to move this water, city pipe, Rose and Dorsey pipe, and then we would tie all of our rain drains to it as well and move it to a point just past the parking here and out into the wetland.
I have a question about getting the more of like a logistics question of getting the drain installed and through the portion of the wetlands that you'll be crossing. I'm assuming it'll be relatively near to the bridge itself.
Yeah, you know what? I misspoke. I think our plan for these is gonna be to come out into the Hemlock drainage. And then we're gonna take the drainage from the garage and then the city drainage and the Dorsey drainage and take it past the parking and discharge it there north of the parking spaces.
So for the residences, when they go onto the Hemlock drainage, that's not going to return to the wetland because that's going east to the other side of Hemlock.
Well, right now, I believe this grades this direction.
Mm-hmm.
And right here, you can see there's a pipe that goes under Hemlock and puts all the water all ends up over here. There's a 12-inch pipe that goes under the roadway there at the northeast corner. So I think all of this water ends up there.
Except that the water coming from Forest Lawn does get to enter the wetland, whereas what's going along Hemlock will not enter the wetland.
This water will not enter the wetland.
Okay,
This will go to, yeah.
that clarifies.
Yeah.
So Clay, your question would be, it will not go to wetland.
Right. How would you get it into the wetland? If that becomes a point we talk about, is there a reasonable way that you can get that water from the southernmost house into that wetland?
Not according to our current code.
We can come over that, I think. I may be wrong about that, but it would be a discussion.
I think that would be a discussion with Public Works to allow us to put it into like a dry well and let it disperse naturally into the wetland.
Well, at a minimum, it would be I think, given some of the objection that we've had with this wetland, a great PR move. We're going to discuss it. We may be able to come up with something, but I'm glad we had the chance to talk about it. I have a better understanding of your plan, but with that in mind. And one of my concerns now is just that water. And so anything, you've given me a lot of color to the conversation. Anything else you want to add? Certainly welcome.
We have to take into consideration that, that additional water, granted, it may still be there, it may increase the wetland as well. I would want to take that into consideration that we may be back.
The water that's falling where those houses are right now goes to the wetland. So what?
Technically is.
Not technically, actually.
I don't want to.
Actually.
Worry about adding more in any way,
But you aren't adding more if the water that falls on bare ground is trickling into the wetland. So I think the concern is that it actually constitutes removal of water when you are taking rainwater drainage.
Except that the water from Forest Lawn Road that's now discharging into the public right of way and then trickling onto our upland. And all of the water that's coming off of Dorsey's house that was going directly onto our property will now all be directed into the wetland. And then the water that falls on the roofs of the houses, it's different than water that falls onto the native ground because that water dissipates and flows slowly into the wetland. If we take a bunch of water off of our roofs and pump it into the wetland, it might have an unintended effect.
I definitely agree with the slow dissipation issue. Obviously, in a perfect world, there would be a way to create a basin that allows it to dissipate. But if we're just talking volume, we're not talking delivery. That volume of water did go to the wetland, and the reality is that probably most of the runoff that is being collected in those previous 3 catch basins was once part of this, let's call it ancestral wetland that has slowly become smaller with each subdivision. So I think it's legitimate to say, because of the way that grade works, this was a natural drainage for probably a very large area surrounding here. So we don't have to decide this tonight, but I think that would be my view.
Well, we are gonna come up with something, and that's why I want.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can take it north to the wetland on the along Hemlock Street, but at that point, when you get far enough north along Hemlock, along the side of the wetland, the city has a large pipe draining the wetland there. It gets real full and it drains fast all winter long. I mean, it's full and moving a lot of water, or Forest Lawn Road would flood. I mean, you can see how high it gets out there.
Part of the understanding, and I only got this through this process, is the idea that a wetland is also a filtration system. So you have water moving through this section as well. If we're just pumping it down here, we're almost creating a pond. So the idea would be that you have this footprint and this footprint that, let's just call them an umbrella, catch water, and are moving water in this direction, filtering water in this direction through the wetland. And we will, if we take this footprint and this footprint, we're taking away some of that filtration function. So that's something I'm noodling on, trying to figure out. I think we're noodling on to try to figure out.
Jason, we could drywall the roof runoff and then it would collect in one spot and then slowly dissipate out into the.
Okay. That's the kind of conversation.
And we have 2 locations, the north and the south residence.
Yeah.
Those are just basically barrels that we bury with a certain amount of gravel around them and underneath. They collect the water and slowly dissipate.
Sure. I think that's better than.
Can it be, so in Lake Oswego, there's a city requirement to build, I don't know the term, but it looks like a dry pond.
Yeah.
That every house has to have, and the runoff water from the roof goes into these dry ponds, and can that be built?
It's kind of what we're talking about, Dory. It's kind of what we're talking about.
I heard barrel.
Well, because in those situations, I just built one of these in the city of Portland. They collect the water, but then they slowly dissipate it into a pipe that goes into the city system. Their filtration systems are usually sand or gravel. And that's kind of what a dry well would be too, except that we wouldn't pipe it into the city system. We just pipe it out and let it.
It's returning to the site.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions for Mr. Lerman? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there other presentations by the applicant? Are there any proponents that would like to speak? Anybody online? Are there opponents? Please come forward.
Dan Seifert Warmond, P.O. Box 778, Cannon Beach. Your Planning Commission. Once again, I have questions and concerns regarding CU 23-04 Red Crow LLC's application on behalf of Patrick Dave LLC for a conditional use permit. Isn't allowing more than one house on the wetlands law of record stretching our rules beyond their intended meaning. Since there is a concern about access at Hemlock Street to this property by construction, fire, or emergency vehicles, or by residents and visitors, is there a way to access the property from Forest Lawn Road that would be of lesser impact to the wetland lot of record. The residents of Cannon Beach need to know what is really being proposed for development on this wetland lot of record. How can the Planning Commission make a well-informed decision here when you're not really sure what the overall plan of the developer really is? Any minimal amount of development is allowed to take place on this wetland lot of record. Can you please find a legal way to protect the rest of the wetland lot of record from any more development? Would this require a deed restriction? It seems it was only last week that the possibility of condominiums here was brought up to you. Much information on this is needed. How would that actually work? Do you all fully understand the condominium code of the state of Oregon? Would there be a plan that would require a homeowners association? Would the HOA manage all of the wetland lot of record? Who would own the wetland portion, the wetland lot of record? Who would own the garage? Who would own the proposed boardwalk? Who would own the parking area? How many units would be involved? How many units would be allowed? Again, it is my understanding only one house is allowed on a wetland lot of record by our Cannon Beach City Code. Is a condominium development with 3 buildings the same as the one house our code allows? Can you think about parking on Forest Lawn Road and possible congestion when you make your decision? Will problems result if you allow more than one house to be built? Can you think of the precedents that could be set here in so many aspects of this project? Please help us set a precedent of protection and respect for this land, rather than a loosening of the protections we now have. Whatever you decide, please be sure to document each and every part of the decision in writing, so that if we need in the future to address this development and its accountability issues, we can hold this developer to the written documents conditions. Enforcement is a key question here. Once again, with all of these questions and concerns, I ask you to deny this application for a boardwalk, or at least continue the public hearing to get more information if you think it will help you in making your decision. This wetland lot of record deserves adequate protection now and for future generations to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there other opponents who would like to speak? Is there anyone online? No one? No one with their hand up? Okay, would the applicant like to respond?
Yes. Just with regard to the condominium aspect, touched on the Oregon Condominium Act. This ownership of these 2 units would be private, and then the homeowners association would own all of the common elements, the boardwalk, the garage, and all of the land.
You said 2 units, Jamie, though it's 4 though, right? Am I?
No, it's 2.
It's okay. I was confused with that. Thank you. All right.
And the garage.
Right.
Garages are
Common.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Jay's got some.
In response to what we're planning to go there, you know exactly what we're looking for. We have a application to design review for exactly what you see on the screen, and that's in our packet. There's no intention to deviate that. Upon your decision, upon design review decision, we go to permit. That, what you see is what we're doing. In regards to access, the only access that would not be over the wetland is from Forest Lawn, or is from Hemlock. Otherwise, we're running 30-ton machines through wetlands and tree roots and everything else. And we have clearly stated that that access is temporary and would be taken out upon completion.
Thank you. Questions? Is there anyone else from your team? Proponents, applicant, or applicant? Okay, great. With that, we'll close the public session and go to consideration. I'd like to start us off.
I would just like to make a comment that I really appreciate the conversation tonight. I feel like it was productive, and I feel like this is an excellent example of questions and problem solving. And I also really appreciated all the public input that we had, both in writing and verbally, and I always do, but this time I just wanted to say, I really feel like when I'm making a decision, it makes a difference to me to have that public comment. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I during comments we've heard tonight and before, there's one thing that isn't seen when YouTube is on is the training that goes into that we all go through to understand the law, our code. There's still sections that, we're getting updated. It's a small town, and we're learning as we go as well, doing our best to understand a complicated development world, but trying to stay within that framework and also, making sure we don't have some sort of a personal bias, and at the same time, protecting things that are important to the community. So public testimony is so important to us. At some point, though, we do have the law we're working within. So I feel the same way. Good process so far. And not a process that, as Mr. Lermer pointed out, not a process that began in October. This is a long process. I appreciate the effort of the developer to come up with something that may not be perfect in a lot of the eyes of people who are opposed to this, but is a long way from what was initially proposed. So that is something that we've also considered. So with enough of that, let's get to the project in front of us.
Yeah, Steve?
I know there was a lot of discussion last time about conditions of approval and things of that nature. And there were several conditions that staff put together. I could share with those either verbally or in writing, and if people wanted to take a look at it. But we had talked about certain conditions as far as access, homeowners associations, 120 square feet. If you'd like, I could pass that around, or I could read it, whatever.
Why don't you read it just for and less, so we all are kind of on the same page?
Sounds good. So, and one of the comments that was made last time was concerns about fire. And we did have the opportunity to speak to Chief Recommend, who indicated that they did not have issues from a fire perspective. And they would also, at the time of building permit, be a part of the review of the structures themselves, just like they are any development in the city.
Oh, that is actually going to be the comments I had. I just
sign off on it.
No, is Chief's comments that he has no concern in writing, or was that a verbal conversation?
That was just a discussion I had with him today. If you would like, I can try to get something from him. He came in at 4:00 today before he was doing interviews, and I just wanted to have the ability to speak to him. If you want to contact him, I'm sure he'll say to you the same thing he spoke to me about.
Hey, Steve, can I pause this just for 1 second?
Yeah.
We do need a point of order to discuss. There have been 2 requests for a continuation. We do need to discuss that before we jump into the discussion on this. As I said at the beginning, we did continue this meeting as it was requested. And I want to be more clear than I was initially. We only have a limited time, as the city only has a limited time to approve or deny and take appeals of any project. If we do not meet that time frame, or we do not make a decision in that time frame, the project is automatically approved as it was requested. So one of the things that the city council has asked us to do is to try to limit the number of appeals. I see Bill coming on here, so I'm ready for the cliff notes after I'm done here. You know what? I'm not even gonna keep going. I'm just gonna trip. You're up, Bill.
No, I appreciate it. And, you know, when we get into the 120-day rule and violation, it gets a little tricky. But when we violate the 120-day rule, it doesn't mean an application is automatically approved. What it means is that the applicant has the right to go to court and sue the city saying, and the burden flips. Instead of the applicant having to make its case, the city would have to then show up in court and explain why it doesn't meet the criteria. It's an expensive proposition. It can result in attorney's fees. It's something that's not good for a number of policy reasons for the planning commission. So I think there's a lot of good reasons to avoid violating the 120-day rule, but it doesn't mean automatic approval. And that was just, I wanted to make sure that got out.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you're there covering me. And then again, the city council has asked us not to, we had granted, given multiple continuations a number of times, and city council has come to us and asked not to do that because they have a very full agenda. So the reason for going into this 2 times tonight is it is not taken lightly, these requests for extension for additional time, but we do have some constraints that we are also having to consider in any project. Okay, so do we want to have a discussion about the request for continuation?
I feel comfortable with the information we have that we could reach a decision.
I don't know what other information we could possibly ask for or get by granting a continuation.
Okay.
I agree. I feel like after a discussion, we can come to a consensus.
Les, Aaron, that sound good to you guys?
I'm good with that, Clay, with one request, and that's to hear the consensus of the group toward this condominium law, which, as I appreciate it right now, clearly trumps what's written in our current code. Is that really the way to understand that?
Let's have that be a discussion point, and we won't, we wouldn't continue based on that, but we'll talk about that. Aaron, are you good with? Okay. All right.
I'm ready to go.
All right, I like it. So we will not be granting a continuation. Do we want to start with the question? No, we want to finish what you were saying, Steve.
Yeah, and just so you know, I wrote them a couple of emails and I didn't get any.
It was just a question. I just.
Right.
Yeah,
so I just wanted to at least be able to present verbally this evening.
Yep.
So I apologize for not getting it in writing. Other than that, as far as some of the conditions to potentially think about, one, we talked about the maximum size of the footbridge. The accessory structure shall be 120 square feet. Second one, owner shall obtain temporary access to and from South Hemlock Street through Public Works Department prior to building permit issuance. Number 3, temporary access to South Hemlock Street is for construction purposes only and shall not be used as permanent access for the use of the dwellings. Permanent access for the dwelling shall be from Forest Lawn Road only. Number 4, owner shall submit plans to the Community Development Department, Public Works, and Fire Department specifically detailing how the temporary access to South Hemlock Street shall be closed. Applicant shall permanently close the temporary access prior to issuance of an occupancy permit, 30 days. That kind of is a discussion to potentially have. Owner shall provide a draft copy of the homeowners association for the management of common areas, including but not limited to the footpath, boardwalk, prior to building permit issuance. Prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy, the owner shall provide a recorded copy of the homeowners association from Clatsop County to the Community Development Department. And the accessory structure shall not be used as an accessory dwelling unit per section 17.541, whatever the Cannon Beach zoning ordinance. And then you guys had talked a little bit also about the storm drainage. I haven't thought of language or on that tonight, but those were just a couple of ideas if you so choose to include those.
Is there a difference? Do we have a temporary certificate of occupancy and a final certificate of occupancy?
Sometimes there's been a temporary granted, very rarely, but I'm trying to think of when a situation, maybe like landscaping.
No,
That-
no, not so much landscaping. It's at the building official's discretion. So I'm kind of going out on a little bit of a limb here, but generally at the building official's discretion. And it's a situation where the house is effectively like 99.9% ready to go. There's just some kind of a minor issue that needs to be fixed before it can have the final sign off.
No health, safety issues, nothing to that effect.
One of the things that I'm noodling on is enforcement. And how do you make sure that what we're asking for is done? And one mechanism might be to issue the temporary certificate of occupancy with the final certificate of occupancy being contingent on all of the provisions of the approval being completed. Is that?
It's fair.
Okay. They can, with a temporary certificate of occupancy, you could have people move in?
That's correct. If there's no health, safety issues.
Okay. Got it.
That still concerns me. I'm concerned that unless the access from Hemlock is closed, that will be used as a potentially convenient way to move stuff into these residents. I would like I would like that access to be closed once construction is done.
What is the timing gap between issue? And this may be too much. I know I'm catching you guys cold, but this literally just came to me. Is there an expiration for a temporary certificate of occupancy to final certificate of occupancy, i.e. it expires if you don't go to final before a certain time?
I'm not familiar enough with the building code to answer that.
Okay.
But it would still, if temporary gives people access to dwelling, then again, I don't want any use of.
The idea would, I'm not sure I'm right on this, but the idea would be it's a limited time between temporary and final. And if they have a period, say 30 days, I'm making up what the gap would be between temporary and final. But if it was 30 days, they have that access anyway, not ideal, but we're always going to have that risk unless we have some way of closing the door, unless we have some.
So we can close the door as soon as construction is done. When construction is done and the equipment is removed, the access from Hemlock needs to be closed. Should have nothing to do with occupancy.
There is a legitimate concern, though, that when construction is done, something remains to be done, and the only way to get there would be through a wetland.
What could possibly need to be done after construction is finished and everyone has signed off on the final walkthrough? Because I'm assuming there will be a final walkthrough that would require such equipment. They have to use South Hemlock entrance. It would probably just require one or a few of the crew to come in a regular truck that they clearly now have parking for to fix whatever could have been found.
So I think this may be a question for Steve, but I think we may have a definition difference here in our language that the occupancy permit is what's issued the day that final inspection is done.
Right.
And so once everything is actually done, they issue that permit. And so that would start the timer. All the inspector leaves, the equipment is pulled off site. That would start the 30 days or 60 days that we're discussing. That timer would start that day at that final inspection. I think if
I understand and think that I appreciate that. My concern is that I want to limit the window in which that access from Hemlock can be used for anything but construction. And 30, 60 days is not, I don't find to be acceptable.
In the grander picture, in the bigger picture, we're protecting the access, or we're protecting I guess I went back to 87 and looked at the original reason they put this in place. And what I came away with was it was 101 at the time. It was Highway 101 at the time, and they were concerned about traffic coming in and out, and they wanted to protect the view corridor. So it's no longer 101, although it's still a very popular, it's our main street. And we ultimately are protecting the view corridor, whether it's, we would be lenient on that timing, but I think my thinking on the idea was, let's protect the corridor, but give something that isn't going to be appealed. It's kind of a trade, if you will. So that the developer, we don't handcuff the developer with something we can't come up with. I can't say they need they wouldn't need a 5-ton HVAC unit, but they might need a new tree. They might need something that is bigger, that would require a bigger piece of machinery.
So let me counter argument. So a year from now, they need a new tree and they say the only way they can do it is to reopen South Hemlock. So now we have established that we will just open and close access that is not really open and closed at whenever it's needed. There has to be a line in the sand.
But I think that line in the sand is saying you have a project, you have construction. We're being lenient, if you will, of something the city said you couldn't do, in exchange for you telling us, here's the date we're not going to use it again, because we're going to, in my opinion, we would come and say, you're going to restore that to its natural condition and it will never be used again. And whether that's 30 days or 60 days, as long as we have a date that we get that guarantee and we have a way to enforce that we get that, I'm okay with another 2 months to protect it for the next generations.
Okay, well, in this case, we're agreeing to disagree.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair way of saying it. I hope we're coming up with something that I think we both have the concern about the view corridor, and we're trying to find ways to protect it. So I think there's agreement there in terms of the other, okay,
It's a tough logistic question. You know, I understand the argument though, that the day you get the permit, is every single piece of equipment going to be done and out? Maybe it's not. So it just seems like asking for something to people to turn around and say, oh, by necessity, sorry, I've got to keep it open for an extra 2 weeks anyway, because it's raining and I can't get my truck in there to get this big piece of equipment out. So I'm kind of guessing that someone's not going to move in that quickly after an occupancy permit anyway. I would imagine it's going to take a little bit of time, but it's hard to say.
if we had a provision that said it was only for construction, that.
No, because that can be misinterpreted in so many different ways.
I think we should have the provision anyway, but I agree with Dorian that that particular provision wouldn't stop someone from.
Sure. All right, well, let's keep moving on.
I think my concern with the access is to be sure that it's done right in terms of revegetation, proper removal of bark or anything else that has been put down that needs to be removed. I think that to me is really who's going to take on the oversight.
I had just suggested we move on, but before we move on, any other thoughts on this item from other commissioners? Okay, well, let's, there's plenty of other things here to talk about. Do you guys want to move on to another item?
Sure.
Okay. Who would like to?
One of the provisions that Steve brought up was ensuring that the accessory structure, the garage, I'm assuming is what you're referring to in that, is not used as habitable space, not used as an occupancy. I had that concern when I was looking through today, noticing that it says storage, but it's 1,200 square feet of storage.
Sure.
1,200 square feet of storage that's bigger than my house. So it's a space that could easily be converted if allowed.
Okay, that's a good point.
And on the HOA, I do think the footbridge is important to maintain, but this also needs to be about the entire wetland.
Right.
And this needs to be, this is a special wetland. This is development right on top. We need to place a top priority on the HOA, ensuring that there is proper both legal, that they're actually abiding by any legal requirements under the municipal code, but also taking the extra step to ensure that the wetland is being protected.
Maybe maybe where it just says including but not limited to footpath, boardwalk, ensure protection and function of wetland. I mean, we could include that as more of the specific as far as et cetera, but maybe putting that specific language in there helps to make sure that that gets in there as well.
Do you think that's enough?
No, I feel like you need to tie it to specific language.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to tie it, we would need to tie it to the wetland provisions to really make sure that that was clear. Otherwise it's ambiguous.
Yeah.
Otherwise we're broad. So some reference to,
Protection function of, well, I'll let you guys.
Also, I have a question about tying it to specific language that's
Changing?
today's language.
Yeah, it would be
If it-
nice
if
to
it's-
say
if it's tied-
compliance with. You know, if there's a way to say current wetland overlay provisions and protections, current as in whatever the current code is at that time. So it's
Most current code,
it's an ongoing responsibility.
right? So you could say the most current code.
Question from staff. Is that changing rules for the applicant because the applicant is reviewed under code in effect at the time the application is submitted?
So the structure would be determined by current code as it is on the day that it's approved. But I'm thinking about vegetation management, et cetera. That's not a grandfathered in right. So if they come and they want to remove a tree that, just as a complete example, they want to remove a tree that currently could be removed under today's code, but they want to do this in 10 years when the code has changed, they're going to have to comply with the code 10 years from now because
Yes,
that's not a grandfathered in right.
correct.
So I think
Separate application.
what I am envisioning is the aspects of the wetland provisions that don't relate to where the building sits, but instead relate to, let's say, runoff patterns or vegetation management that may change from the current provisions. And I think those, they would have to comply with whatever the code is at that time.
I think you're right on the money that, you know, the application's in here today, so it's coming in just from a construction standpoint. But as it changes down the line, they're gonna have to meet that specific code at that point in time for, depending on what they're talking about doing. But whether that's a separate item, you know, yes, it gets incorporated maybe into the homeowners association. Maybe that's a separate condition.
Legally, it's their requirement anyway, but
Similar to the ADU.
it's a way of bringing a little extra emphasis and oversight.
Yeah.
I feel like, yeah, if we tie it in there, that addresses.
Okay.
How about the drywall? Do people like that idea for the water runoff?
What is the difference between a dry well and a bioswale? Does anybody know that?
I'm not sure. I think a bioswale's trying to, well, I'll let the.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to have input on this, but I think the bioswale is more kind of ditch-like and kind of a slow flow out of it. I think the drain, you may have heard of like French drains or something where they just kind of let the water go in and then infiltrate through that and then disperse, you know, kind of more underground compared to a bioswale that filters it and it goes underground, but you might have water that you see for a little bit of time. And then eventually when it's dry, it's, you know, more grass type situation. Is that fair?
A bioswale is basically like a open container that will have.
Jay, I'm super sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your opinion, but we can't take,
Sorry about that.
no problem. Well, we can Google it then.
Yes,
Just
exactly.
ask Google.
That's, yeah. I think my main question would be, I like the idea of some form of local collection and drainage. I'm not an expert enough to know what is the least disruptive of the wetland to actually put in. So whatever, like, let's say you do a dry well, you're probably gonna have to do some excavation for that. I just want to make sure we're not hurting the continuity of the area around in the process of putting that in.
I think either one is going to have some level of impact in terms of
Okay.
excavation and installation of it, but is there, I don't know if there be a provision for just requiring that runoff be retained on site through either and list off bioswale, dry well.
Yeah.
And using the least impact
I like that.
means altogether while still retaining runoff.
Yeah.
That is, that's a wonderful solution, I think.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Okay, I think any of them are gonna have some level of impact, because the bioswale, you're gonna have to dig to create a particular flow of whatever direction it needs to go, and then the dry well is gonna be a physical construction underground.
Right, great idea. The HOA. I think, I talked about the wetland and tying it in.
Yeah.
I don't think we talked about common areas. Needed to be defined. The common areas would be, and I'm just gonna talk out loud, anyone else? You've got footbridge, garage, the structures. The wetland itself would be a common area, am I right?
Yeah, definitely.
That's parking area, north
Parking area?
So in other HOAs in town, basically everything that is not part of the dwelling unit has been considered the common area. Driveways, sidewalks, yards, everything. The dwelling units themselves have been the owner's private property.
So the idea would be the homeowners association is created, it protects the wetland in the way we talked about. And it, among other things, it protects the wetland, it names the common areas and that the maintenance for them is common responsibility. What else would be?
And for the
Just kind of
access,
Access,
so when that access is closed up, whose responsibility is it? Is it the current applicant? Or is he at that point sold it and it now becomes the homeowner's responsibility to close off the access and to maintain that vegetation, et cetera?
I just put owner,
Okay,
meaning if it's the owner now or if it's someone else. I think if we put it that way, I think it takes place, it addresses either. But, obviously most of the time you're talking about the contract or, the owner developer. That was the idea of maybe just saying owner because it covers whoever that may be.
I don't like.
I don't know if Bill,
Oh, I think it should be the builder.
Yeah, the developer should do that. Developer should do it because they know the concern, they've been through the process. And we've got a better chance of holding them responsible than we do broadly the owner, I think.
And they've also been the ones arguing I've not seen of anyone else other than.
it could also be something to the effect of, and almost on any of these, if you wanted developer / owner. I mean, there's another way of, either it covers both.
but if we do the temporary and final occupancy permit, that's a way to make sure that,
Right, that's.
It's the
that's-
applicant
That's our
before us.
guarantee.
right?
As long as there's
A
an
process
actual,
for it.
a process for the conversion of a temporary to a permanent that.
Right. Who ultimately does that? And are they going to be looped in that they have to have all these things cleared?
Well, let's go ahead, Steve.
That would be building inspection and planning
Okay.
staff. Yes,
So you know the drill and.
well, it would be our responsibility.
And do you guys, no, you don't. That, would it be helpful? No, it wouldn't. I mean, this internal conversation. I'm just thinking about that time between temporary and final.
Because what stops the applicant from just maintaining temporary occupancy?
Temporary has to expire. You can't have that forever.
The person wanting to get in the house, that's the only thing I can tell you.
Yeah,
Get in the house with temporary.
yes, we've had temporary permits, temporary occupancies that have gone on longer than we would have preferred. Generally speaking, like I said, a temporary occupancy is supposed to be for something extremely simple that is supposed to be very quickly getting fixed. We've held up properties, for example, because they had a tree on order. So we gave them a 30-day temporary occupancy permit with the condition that they had to get the tree in the ground before we give them the final C of O. That sort of thing. There's nothing really interfering with the habitability of the house. There's no life, health, safety. Generally, we don't encourage the use of temporary C of Os.
Yeah, it's certainly more layers of complication, but I don't think anybody's under any delusion. We're not in a complicated situation here with this property. So we could put out a timeline between the two. So someone doesn't have a certificate of occupancy for their property. If I'm buying a house from a developer, I want the both. I don't want to deal with issues, and I need to disclose it if I'm a developer. I don't have final. I get final when I take these actions. So there's some levers there that are going to protect us in that.
But unlike in a traditional building where a home is being built by a builder developer and being sold to someone else, in this case, they're one and the same. So I just don't know that the temporary really achieves what we're hoping it would achieve.
Well, I don't know either, but I can't think of anything else that would guarantee you could bond it, have the developer put up a bond. I think that's probably even less popular. That guarantees these things will be done.
Or you can just say, you hold a certificate of occupancy until the road access is closed.
That's a challenge that you start to get into a logistical challenge unless you have a temporary, then they can't sell the units.
We're talking about, well, then the developer or the builder is incentivized in this case to do it quickly so that their client can sell their properties. So that we do have it helps us by doing it that way because we're ensuring that it will get done quickly.
Yeah, having been through not developing a subdivision, but being through the process of developing property, always something comes up that you don't see coming. I don't know what it is in this case. They probably don't know what it is, but it will be something. So the idea is just to come up with some, not ideal for us, but reasonable. So that, and again, this is me. I'm like trying to find a reasonable way to protect these bigger intentions. But, and there's no perfect way that I can see right now. But I feel like we have to have something. How often do you guys see?
Well, so is there, we've like, I guess continuing to beat a dead horse, the putting a maximum time frame on that, the temporary occupancy the certificate of temporary certificate of occupancy 30 days or whatever before final, so that the developer can at that point be like, okay, we have this is our final step. We can begin sale, we can begin whatever the intentions are. Once they receive temporary, because they know everything in the structure itself is done. And the only thing that's being held up on is the closure of the road that must be done within 30 days of.
But if they know everything's been done, why do we need the temporary?
Well, I thought that was explained during the applicant or during the presentation that when they're doing the inspection, there's still the possibility for access, because if it's not approved at that time, they may have to get equipment in there, so they may still have vehicles or whatever on site, or may need, otherwise they would close it up prior to that. The building inspector would find an issue, and then they'd have to rebuild that access, go back in for whatever the issue is.
I remember they're gonna have some steel plates down too to protect the tree roots, so it's not as simple as driving a pickup truck out. There is actually gonna be something that has to be removed. And I think they have to wait until they're sure there's nothing heavy that needs to drive in to do more work.
Right, but correct me if I'm wrong, isn't the issuance of certificate of occupancy once the inspector has signed off on everything? Everyone signed off on everything at that point, is that not correct? So what else would they possibly come up with that they would need to bring equipment in once everything was signed off by all parties?
Well, it's waiting until that sign off, so they wouldn't want. And in my mind, you wouldn't want to close off your access if there's a chance that the building inspector would not sign off on.
I see what you're saying, okay.
On that particular day, and then you would have whatever time frame we're discussing to close that access, because you don't know, maybe there's an issue you didn't know.
Right, but they wouldn't get, but if the inspector had an issue, they wouldn't issue the certificate.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So we can tie in the closure with the issuance of the certificate, because at that point, the inspector has signed off on everything.
But I think it's just a question of like, how instantaneously can you have a sign off and have everything out? And maybe there's equipment that they're waiting to make sure I'm not going to remove the steel plate that's protecting the roots until I know the inspector signs off. How long does it take to remove that final plate or whatever it is? It's probably not going to be an hour later. So I think that's the question. Just logistically, how long does it take after sign off to do the final steps and then close off the access and do the revegetation, which isn't going to be just a 1 hour job either. That by itself is going to require some time. So we need to allow that window, I think, just logistically. It's not a perfect world.
I'm just concerned, and no disrespect to anyone, I'm just concerned that the longer the window is, the more time there is to forget about it.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
I think that's the idea behind the temporary
Right.
to final, is that the temporary is, yes, everything is done. Now get those steel plates out of here. And then final is steel plates are out of here. I think that's the idea that we were discussing about that.
Yeah.
Robert, can we ask Robert a question?
Sure.
Robert, what issues do you see with issuing a temporary?
It's really a case by case thing. The biggest issue, like I said, this is more building world than anything, is just simply lack of follow through.
Okay.
So let's say we issue out something 30 days, for example, using a tree. If we're holding up a C of L on a tree, we tell them you got 30 days to get the tree in. They say, we got it on order, our landscaper's coming. 30 days goes by. Oh, hey, I don't have that tree. And it's kind of not the highest thing on our priority list. I would say that it is something that can, not always does, but can get deprioritized.
Those are typically the homeowner that's developing the property themselves, though, right?
It depends case by case.
Because it seems a natural lever, if you will, is buyer, seller, developer, owner, whatever you want to call it here. If I'm buying something that's done. I'm going to want that final certificate of occupancy. I don't want to buy something I have to go deal with the city of Cannon Beach on. I want to buy something that's done. So now the developer has incentive to get that done. So if I don't have certificate of occupancy because I'm missing a tree or because an access isn't closed the way it should be, I've got a lever over the guy I bought it from.
On paper, yes. In an ideal world, yes.
Well, I mean,
it's the best we can do.
About as good as
Does the temporary permit expire? Can it be set with an expiration date?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I've really thought about that. I don't think we can come up with that and not just get into the weeds. I was hoping I could work through that. I don't see it.
It feels like the building inspector's purview, completely outside of what we can do.
I think the good news is, I think we have a set of conditions that make sense. And so what we're really doing now is we're talking about enforcement, right?
Yeah. Eh, well, in fairness, mostly talking about enforcement. A 30-day period after,
I will abstain from this part of the
okay,
conversation.
fair enough. Do we feel like we have enough information to make a motion here? Or do we want to have a further discussion?
So I think we haven't really addressed Les's issue in detail, have we?
Well, thank you. Yes, Les, on the, I'm so glad you remembered that.
And before that, can you take a break?
Les, we're going to take a 2-minute break. We have a request to stretch. Les, do you want to revoice your concern about the our common understanding of the what's being put before us on the condominium aspect of this?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd like to circle back just one real quick minute on the prior conversation that y'all were having. I recall that in that planned development up on the hill, one of the big issues was that the homeowners association never got developed. And some of the things that were their responsibility never got done. I wonder if in this case, one of the conditions might not be that the builder must fulfill all of the obligations of the homeowner association until such a time as the homeowner association actually gets created. Because a lot of the things that y'all were kind of talking about, landscaping, trees, the steel plates that are protecting the roots, really are in the common area. They're not specifically tied to either of the buildings.
So that would apply more to the wetland, it seems like.
Well, even the walkway and the accessory bridge. I mean, it's all HOA, not individual homeowner.
When I bought into a subdivision that was still in the process of being built, the builder was the HOA until such time as whatever percent was sold and they relinquished it to the HOA, but the builder had to come up with the language and all the processes. So there was an HOA and bylaws established by the builder and their representatives.
Well, we could have a requirement that the HOA is completed prior to and
I feel like that was part of the second provision that mentioned the HOA. And
Prior to issuance of certificate of occupancy, the owner shall provide a recorded copy of the homeowners association from Clatsop County to the Community Development Department.
But I like Les's suggestion that, just to be very clear, we say the developer is obligated to fulfill those obligations until such time as the HOA takes over, just to be really clear that if it hasn't been sold yet, even though the HOA exists on paper, those obligations are remaining with the developer. And it sounds like a lot like what.
Yeah, I like that.
Was the case when you bought that the developer was the HOA. Maybe that's true legally anyway.
I believe it is, yeah, but.
It maybe doesn't hurt to be clear.
Sure.
I think in this case, the more clarity we can in all cases, the more clarity we can provide, the better.
Okay, thank you. So my understanding is our own code 1790-170 says duplexes shall not have separate ownership. But then I lesser understand the new condominium code ORS 100.022, which I can read, but I don't fully understand. But the conversation makes me think that it makes our city code no longer valid, that we cannot require duplexes to have common ownership.
We need Bill.
Do you agree with that or not?
Bill question.
Bill, you want to?
Yeah, and I guess my answer would be a little more nuanced. The reality is that we cannot prohibit somebody from taking their property and condominium, making it a condominium. So, you know, and when somebody makes a condominium, they can create separate units, provided they meet the terms of the condominium code. So yes, to a certain extent, if somebody wants to go through the condominium process, we cannot require that they remain in the same ownership. However, we can say that, you know, you can't partition or otherwise create separate lots out of this further based on that. So, you know, we can control the land use piece of it. We just can't control the condominium. And frankly, the reality is that that is an exception that swallows the whole. But yeah, that code is largely unenforceable based on the state of Oregon preempting the ability of cities to regulate condominiums.
Bill, was that also, was there language in there that said the personal property? In that, was that where that section was? It talked about.
It was in our code. So
It's in our code, sorry. It's in our code that talks about that duplex provision and personal property.
Right, I forgot about that. It's, you know, good.
So I've been racking so real estate is real property. Is a timeshare maybe what they were, I can't figure out why that's in there. Is that like a timeshare? Trying to stop timeshares? Why would you do that?
I don't know. That's a good question, because when I read it, I had the same reaction you did. It didn't make any sense to say personal property. I hadn't thought of timeshares, but that may well be what it's aimed at. I really don't know, did not go back into it, but I don't know if timeshares are real property or personal property, but I think you're right. And if that's the case, that would be something that code section would really prevent, is timeshares.
Yeah, because these are real property. It's not personal property.
Correct.
The way, I mean, I guess the code would stop them from making timeshares. I haven't seen much about timeshares in Cannon Beach or country for.
Yeah, I mean, and as you say that, what I don't see is timeshares, but what I have seen is people buying a house, it being titled in one name, and then having contractual arrangements with 3 other families so that each family gets, you know, 3 months a year. And, you know, I've never had to deal with it, but I know people who have those type of arrangements, and that may well qualify as a timeshare, whatever that is. And that may be a personal property that this would actually be aimed at. But you're right, the use of the term personal property struck me as very odd when I read that as well.
Did that help, or did you want to hear from commission members our thoughts on this?
You know, no, my question was around, that was an issue that came up last time in our discussions. And my recollection was that we thought maybe that was a significant issue that might have precluded what the builder is proposing, but it sounds like that is not the case to me.
That's my read on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to make sure that we at least had a chance to talk about it.
I'm glad you did, and Dorian, thank you for that. Sure. Any other questions on that front? No. Do we want to have further discussion about what we've been talking about, or does anyone want to brave a motion?
Not sure I could remember all the conditions, but I'm happy to try to make a motion and maybe get Steve to supplement here. So here's my first attempt. Maybe
we're with you.
Okay. So I am making a motion to approve, if I name it, CU 2304 with conditions.
Oh, may I just make one quick thing? Conditionally approved. I think we need to see this before we.
So we'll conditionally approve because we would like to see the findings. So with conditions of a maximum footbridge size of 120 square feet. There will be temporary access off of Hemlock, which is only for construction and to be removed at the end of construction. I think we decided that within 30 days of a, do we say temporary?
Temporary certificate of
For
occupancy.
certificate of occupancy, the construction access would be revegetated and permanently returned to its natural state.
And I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, there is a little bit about certificate of occupancy and not being issued until that is satisfied.
Okay, and that would be, should we say at the very beginning,
You know, maybe we could put that
at the end?
just as a suggestion,
Yeah.
as a blanket for all of it.
That's definitely what I would.
Okay, yeah.
Would apply it all.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we would, Steve, can you help me with the draft HOA? So you said that there would be a recorded HOA agreement?
Yeah. Owner shall provide a draft copy of the homeowners association for the management of the common areas, including but not limited to footpath, boardwalk. I think there was some additional discussion on the protection and function of the wetlands prior to building permit issuance, so at least there would be a draft prior. And then prior to issuance of an occupancy, the owner would provide a recorded copy of the homeowners association to the community development department.
Great. And you also had some good language around the accessory structure was not to be used as a dwelling space. Not to be used as a habitable space?
Yeah, the accessory structure shall not be used as an accessory dwelling unit as per section, the specific section of the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
We could get that in there.
And then finally, we were going to do a little runoff, and can you help us with your language?
The runoff to be collected and retained on site in
The least
in
impact.
the least impactful way, and maybe list the provisions that we have, dry well, bioswale as
One of
examples.
these, yeah, that's good.
And then I think we're on to saying that the final certificate of occupancy will not be issued until all of these conditions have been fulfilled. Oh, do we want to add the language that the builder must fulfill all obligations of the HOA until such time as the HOA is created?
Until such time as it's assigned to the new buyer
Okay, until such time as it is assigned to the new buyer.
or buyer.
Yeah.
Could you repeat that one?
Sure. So the builder must fulfill all obligations of the HOA until such time as the HOA is assigned to a buyer.
There's a
Builder
small
developer.
glitch in that, though.
Is there?
Builder developer, and it has nothing to do with being assigned to a buyer. It needs to be assigned to an HOA has to be created by the new buyers.
But it's going to have to be created and recorded before they issue the certificate of occupancy. I think the question is it just a shell? Or are there individuals who are actually enforcing and carrying out the work of being the HOA? So my concern is it exists on paper.
Right.
But if the builder can say, yeah, that's going to be the buyer, that's their problem. It's an HOA for them. We want to make sure that the buyer has to hold that obligation until such time as.
Then it should be buyers, since there's potentially 2 units, right?
Whatever.
I'm just saying.
As
Yeah,
Minutes.
I don't know. Because I could also see that. What if you have one buyer and a developer, what's the,
If you want, I'm assuming we're gonna start talking findings at some point in time that would include the conditions. Certainly can get something drafted up, and then if things potentially need to be amended as part of the adoption of the findings, it could be done then as well. I mean, obviously, I'll create this as best I can based off this discussion, and then it would be brought back for everyone to review and approve. So if you want, I could try to, incorporate that stuff in there as best as I can. And then you guys could take a look at it and, amend as necessary.
is that a complete motion?
I think it is.
I would second that.
Okay, any further discussion? No, all right. Tessa, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Farrow,
No.
Commissioner Moritz,
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner Ostrander,
Yes.
Commissioner Matusik,
Sure, that was a yes.
Chair Newton.
Thank you. Yes. Conditional approval. Ah, okay. Thing on. Report.
Report. Permits were issued in December.
Okay, go to the order. Has anyone else experienced trouble? So when I was talking with Tessa about this, when I follow the link in the email, for example, that Tessa sent with this agenda and packet items, I can get right to what we're looking at. But if I go to the city's website, I don't see tonight's material. I don't know if that's a me.
You don't see tonight's
I didn't.
packet?
No, not at all.
Oh.
And a couple times we've had people come to us and say, I can't see the packet.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering if we might have, if it's just a me or if it's a we or what, but it is
I've honestly never clicked on the link in the email.
just me.
I just go straight to.
Yeah, go to the website and open up the.
Will you try, Robert, just for kicks? Go to, and I'll just give you my little path. It's, sometimes I'll go straight to, well, the way I probably do it most is City of Cannon Beach Planning Commission. And agenda and minutes up there. Yeah, so our meeting tonight is not on there. So something's going on. Where the public's not getting, I don't know.
Oh,
why.
You go to
so
upcoming-
go, if you scroll up a little bit, there's two tabs, upcoming meetings and recent meetings.
Oh, interesting.
And tonight still counts as upcoming until midnight.
Right.
Oh,
So user.
that's what's happening. That's what's happening, is I'm not educated.
That just switched.
That just,
That is a recent change.
That's a recent change.
Yeah, this is.
It used to be,
because we have heard from
Yeah.
several people, they're not finding the package.
Scroll down.
That is it
Yes.
right there.
Okay.
Okay.
That's new.
I got confused on this because I was like, how did the meetings from yesterday all disappear?
Right.
And it took me a while to realize, oh, it's bumped over to that second tab now.
Gotcha.
I didn't have the problem with today's, I just had the problems with every other meeting. How have I lost every meeting?
I didn't either, but I was like, what is going on? Why am I missing it? Okay, that makes sense. In the package, and I don't have an answer here. I'm curious. In the package, one thing I noticed, Dorian, tonight is you were asking about plans that were part of the last meeting, but not part of the package this meeting. Is our protocol that the entire package is re-put into the record if we have a request to continue?
I think we generally just tag on the
The new stuff.
supplemental, the new exhibits, and if we have any supplemental staff report, we would just add that on.
Do you want?
I think there is a potential for confusion. Trust me, every time I look at a 500-page packet,
Yes.
it's tough. But in fairness to people who might be coming cold to the process, they're only going to see a portion of what we're considering in a meeting, and they would have to know to go back to find it.
Yeah, part of it is to reduce those 500-page packets, because a lot of that, a surprising amount of that is duplication.
Oh, that continuation is probably 90%.
Would it work to just have a really large indication on their previous packet found at?
Yeah, right up front. That's a good idea.
Just
That would be a great idea.
items that have been continued some kind of very, very clear notation. This packet is located at such and such date, and then someone can go to the website and download that previous one and know which one to find, because sometimes it was in the past. When was it?
You can actually hyperlink it in the PDF.
Yeah, we could put something like
Yeah.
that in a supplemental staff report, something like that.
Right.
Simply reference.
Yes, right, just so that folks who do need to catch up can.
Okay,
Okay,
anything else? Anything you guys want to
did we
see?
need to talk about scheduling for that
A work
session?
Yes,
So is that best done by email or?
Yeah, I think what I was thinking about doing was maybe touching base with Marcy to see what her kind of schedule is. I don't know what you guys think. Does it make sense to try to do something, like next week we have that housing discussion? Would it be best to try the week after again? Do you guys like that? Do you not like that? Compare, like what we did, obviously last week was a special meeting. I don't know if the plan commission has any preferences.
Personally, if we can avoid Wednesdays,
okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's good to
you
know.
mentioned that.
Yeah.
And
that's really my only input for that.
yeah, no, that's good to know. But maybe, if we wanted to do it, the following Thursday, I don't know if that makes any sense.
I have a standing Friends of Haystack Rock board meeting the second Thursday of every month. But otherwise, I'm clear.
The other thing, so maybe if you want, I could try to shoot for that Thursday after our typical meeting, if that's something that makes sense. Otherwise, I'll just ask Marcy and toss it out to everyone and just see what works. But she said she needed approximately
She wants a
4 weeks or so.
wanted a week from our comments.
Right.
She was just thinking, how long did we need
Right,
to do whatever
yes.
notation we wanted to do?
So I guess I'm open to whatever the commission's.
February 12th, does that feel like it's far enough from this meeting, but also gives us a little time before the 29th, which is our next, the 22nd, which is our next planning commission meeting? We have a joint code audit session on the 29th of January or February.
Okay.
The 12th,
Thursday is available. That is DRB.
I
The Thursday, is that the 15th? Thursday, the 15th is the week before our typical meeting, but I know the design review board meeting got moved from that Thursday, so I don't know if Thursdays work. That's another available date. So I guess if anything, I can talk to Marcy, and if you want, I could just toss out a couple. Is there, other than like Wednesdays, is there bad days?
Well, Wednesday is Valentine's Day, and some people might be celebrating.
All right. No. Good point. Should I talk to her and send out emails?
Why don't we just throw some dates out on that?
All right.
Right around there
I
somewhere.
think if we could try for the 15th, that seems like it would be the best, right?
Clay, you didn't answer on that one. Did that work for you or not?
Is that,
I hate to miss this on YouTube.
okay.
Why do I think Valentine's Day is the 15th?
I don't know.
It's Wednesday?
It's Wednesday, the 14th.
Hallmark.
It's 14th every year.
Listen to Hallmark.
Makes you feel better. I ask when Christmas is every year.
Okay, yeah, 15th works. I knew that.
Aren't you glad that you found one?
Dinah's hopefully not watching. There's nothing interesting now.
Now you have a whole month to plan almost.
That's right.
But the sad truth is I did, but I only said to the person at the restaurant, Valentine's Day, I didn't think about the date.
Show up Thursday.
You're right, what happened?
So what we'd be looking for is, if it was the 15th, then everyone would be looking to try to review by the 7th, with questions, so we can get that on over to her. And I can put that in the email again once so maybe toss out that 15th and see what she has to say. I gotta check with Jen too to make sure we don't have any other city. Nothing on the calendar right now, right? That it shouldn't be because DRB was the only, yeah. So there shouldn't be, it should be available.
It reminded me of one other date we should figure out, which is the date and form we want to talk about reviewing what
Findings.
the findings.
We can do that pretty soon, right?
I think what we've done in the past is got them together, called and
Try to do a special call within a week.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be.
We could do a call, you guys.
Yeah, just a
you good
Zoom
with
or
a
a call would be
Zoom call?
great.
Okay,
A Zoom call would be great.
all right.
Yeah, much better.
And that's roughly a week out. I guess we can just kind of bounce,
Yeah.
back and forth to figure
Let's
people's.
do that.
schedules.
we can look at some schedules and get some dates out to you guys.
Okay, good. Is there anything else? Good of the order? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Les.
Thank you.